Chapter 269. Benefactor, will your family's old lord be able to get used to eating this kind of wild vegetable soup? Scholar and I asked worriedly. Now that we don't have any more food, we can only eat this. Chin Yining's small face was so thin that it wasn't even as big as a grown man's palm, but her pair of almond eyes seemed even bigger and brighter. Scholar and I glanced at Miss 8 and Chin Huining, who were sitting not far behind them and silently crying, and couldn't help but sigh. They were all daughters of the family Chin, but Miss 8 and Chin Huining couldn't endure hardships. They couldn't go out to dig for wild vegetables, and they couldn't even hunt. When they were asked to do some washing and cooking, they looked helpless. They were simply two young misses who didn't do any household chores. During this period of time, the servants that the family Chin brought up the mountain were all busy with their own tasks. Most of the work fell to the men like second old master, third old master, Chin Yu, and Chin Han. Next to them were Chin Yining and her 3 loyal servant girls who could endure hardships the most. At first, there was still some food stored up on the mountain, and Master Zhong had deliberately prepared a lot of food before coming up the mountain. But no matter how much food there was, it couldn't support the large number of people. The consumption was high, and there was no supply for a long time. Now, not to mention 10 taels of silver per caddy, even if one offered 100 taels of silver per caddy, they probably wouldn't be able to buy it. As the number of disaster victims increased day by day, hunting and digging for wild vegetables was no longer an easy task. They had taken over the mountain, but the people in the city had dug out all the grass roots and eaten all the tree bark. At first, there were often people who accidentally ate poisonous grass and died from poisoning. But now, more and more people died, and it was hard to tell how they died. Every time there was a famine, the first to die were always the elderly and children. Who on the mountain didn't have a family to feed? Who didn't want their old father, mother, or children to live? The food was bought with Chin Yining's money, so she had absolute authority. Some people secretly harbored evil intentions, but most of the people around them were deeply grateful to Chin Yining. If they did not want to be condemned by the public, they could only suppress it. However, to their surprise, the Chin Yining did not leave all the food for the Chin family, nor did he abandon the elderly and children. After the food reserves gradually decreased, the healthy adults began to mainly eat wild vegetables and game to fill their stomachs. There were so many people in the family Chin. Other than old madam, everyone was learning how to work. The remaining food was given to the old madam and the pregnant Han's second young mistress to eat. 20 days ago, when Chin Yining held a bowl of porridge that could reflect a person's figure and wanted to take a sip, she saw Dog Yili beside her, who was as skinny as a monkey. She saw the children's wide and watery black eyes. She saw that these children no longer had the energy to pick wild flowers for her. She couldn't swallow the porridge no matter how hard she tried. From that day onwards, Chin Yining did not eat a single mouthful of food. Bing Tang became anxious when she saw this. She told Miss Zhou, Lu Dehan, Scholar and I, and the others about Chin Yining's recent injury. A few days ago, the Chin residents met with a disaster and lost a large number of people. Everyone knows about this. Our miss was seriously injured and barely managed to survive. However, due to excessive blood loss, her foundation was damaged. Before she could recover, she came up the mountain. I can give her medicine, but she can't just starve like this. If the blood loss can't be replenished, I'm afraid it won't benefit her lifespan. Although Bing Tang was young, her medical skills were outstanding. She was also a descendant of the Tang family. Which person on the mountain did not have a headache or fever through her hands? Therefore, everyone on the mountain respected Bing Tang very much. When they heard Bing Tang's words, they became anxious. When they hunted some wild animals or picked some sweet wild fruits, they would first give them to Chin Yining. Scholar and I was 72 years old this year. Before today, he was given a piece of mixed flour pancake every day. He also gave half of it to Chin Yining. However, Chin Yining refused, so Scholar and I gave the other half of the pancake to the other children. From today onwards, the elderly and children were also out of food. They had almost caught all the wild animals on the mountain. The weather was dry and it had not rained for a long time, so the wild vegetables grew slowly. The next step would be to eat the bark of the trees. When Chin Yining saw that the soup was almost ready, he scooped a bowl for Scholar and I. Then, he scooped a bowl for Miss 8 and Chin Huining. Miss 8 smiled gratefully at Chin Yining. On the other hand, Chin Huining lowered his head expressionlessly. He was probably so hungry that he did not have the energy to smile. Chin Yining did not mind. He asked Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and Chiu Lu to help him scoop up the wild vegetable soup and send it upstairs. Unexpectedly, the door of the staircase, which was usually not closed, was closed today. Someone even bolted it from the inside. Bing Tang knocked on the door. Not long after, the door was opened slightly. Mammy Chin opened the door. Miss 4. Mammy Chin looked a little embarrassed. Chin Yining smiled and said, "The vegetable soup is ready. The people who went out to hunt are not back yet. Eat some soup to fill your stomach." Mammy Chin smiled and nodded. However, she did not have any intention of letting Chin Yining in. She reached out to take the bowl in her hand. Chin Yining looked at her suspiciously. Then, he saw the bloodstains and white fur left under her fingernails. His heart skipped a beat. He pushed open the door, and his breath was immediately filled with the fragrance of stewed meat. "Mammy Chin, the people who went out to hunt are not back yet. Why are you still hiding meat in the room?" Mammy Chin lowered her head and did not speak. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and Chiu Lu also came in. Mammy Chin anxiously closed the door. Chin Yining quickly walked inside and found that the windows were all closed. He couldn't help but sneer, "It's a hot day. Don't you think it's hot?" He came to old madam's room and pushed open the door. Bang! The old madam and Han's second young mistress in the room were shocked. At this time, the two of them were each holding a small rabbit leg and happily gnawing on it. In front of them was a casserole. The soup inside was bubbling. In the corner of the room, there were scattered bloodstains. The snow-white rabbit's fur was peeled off and thrown on the ground. The plum blossom-shaped ribbon that Pang Shao had personally tied around Airbai's neck was now soaked in blood. Chin Yining's head buzzed. You ate my Airbai." Old madam drank a mouthful of soup and smacked her lips. "Come quickly. I originally wanted to ask you to come. Look at how thin you are. Drink some soup to nourish your body." Han's second young mistress was not pregnant yet, but she no longer had morning sickness. It was the time when she could eat. She didn't even raise her head as she drank the soup. Mammy Chin awkwardly said, "Fourth young mistress, old madam and second young mistress both need to eat nourishing food." This morning, old madam only ate a bowl of vegetable soup. She was really hungry. Coincidentally, the people who went out to hunt were not back yet. "So, I said. Facing Chin Yining's angry expression, Mammy Chin couldn't explain. "Which day did I not give you meat to eat? When the whole family was eating vegetable soup, I also left the best for you. My little rabbit is not even as big as a woman's palm. After shedding its skin and removing its bones, can it still have 2 tails of meat? Just how heartless are you guys to not even let go of such a small rabbit? The people who went out to hunt will be back soon. You can't wait for even a moment." Old madam didn't have time to be embarrassed. She threw the spoon into the bowl and sneered, "Is this how filial you are to grandmother? Now that there is a famine, only you would raise this food as a pet." Is 2 tails of meat not meat? 2 tails of meat can nourish your second sister-in-law's body and also let her give birth to a son for your second cousin brother. Han's second young mistress drank the soup and said incoherently, Sister-e, later sister-in-law will compensate you with 100 rabbits. Don't be angry. Come and drink the soup. The meat soup cooked in the big pot doesn't even have the taste of meat. Come and taste it. Chin Yining's tears flowed down. Even when she was starving, she never thought of killing Bai because it was personally given to her by Pang Xiao. He said that it was a token between them and also a token of peace between De Zhou and Dian. He even personally untied the plum blossom pattern on the jade pendant and tied it around Bai's neck. At that time, they were so close that she could still remember the unique smell on Pang Xiao's body. She understood all the principles and understood that in a war, everyone had to rely on their own ability. However, she saw with her own eyes the commoners starving to death on the streets one by one. She saw with her own eyes the numb and empty eyes of the people who ate their children. When she was the hungriest, she thought of the bowl of cold noodles that Pang Xiao personally cooked for her. She really hoped that Pang Xiao would suddenly appear and save them from the abyss of suffering. No matter how hungry she was, she didn't want to eat Bai. She hid Bai in the room and carefully took care of it. At night, she hugged it to sleep. Because without it, there seemed to be nothing that could prove their pledge of eternal love. However, now that Bai had been eaten, Chin Yining felt that the nerves that had been supporting her all this time had suddenly snapped. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer. When old Madam saw Chin Yining like this, she also felt guilty. She put on a strong front and said, Isn't it just a beast? As for you, don't think that I don't know where that rabbit of yours came from. After the peace talks in Xihua City, you brought that beast back. Later on, that evil spirit with the surname Feng came to our country to flaunt his power. Let me tell you, that person with the surname Feng caused us to become like this. I only ate the rabbit that he gave you. I haven't even taught you a lesson yet. You have close ties with him. Don't tell me that you still want to rebel. She pinned a label on her because she felt guilty. Chin Yining waved her hand. She didn't want to say another word to someone like old Madam. She picked up the plum blossom net from the blood-stained rabbit's fur and turned to leave old Madam's room. Miss Bing Tang and Qiu Lu hurriedly chased after her and supported Chin Yining on her left and right. Ji Yun sneered, You've really broadened my horizons. There's actually such an ungrateful and shameless old woman like you in this world. Grand Preceptor Qin is such a glorious person. How can he have a mother like you? Truly, a wicked bamboo produces good bamboo shoots. Or did you steal a child from somewhere and raise him? Filthy. Bah. You're rebelling. Someone come. Someone come. You're now the biggest burden. You need people to serve you all day. Do you still think that you're in the residence? Ji Yun glared at old Madam in disdain and turned to chase after her. She was afraid that something would happen to Chin Yining. Ji Yun found Chin Yining, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu beside a small stream outside Ningyuan. Chin Yining squatted by the stream and personally washed the bloodstains on the plum blossom net. She was no longer crying. However, when she saw her squatting on the ground and her thin and weak back that seemed to be able to poke through her clothes, Ji Yun's nose turned sour and she almost cried. Wang Yi, when are you coming? If you don't come, the future Wang Fei will be tortured to death. Not only will she starve, but she will also be tortured in her heart. Ji Yun wanted to persuade her. She opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. At this moment, the sound of footsteps was suddenly heard. A slightly hoarse male voice suppressed his surprise and said breathlessly, Is that you? Chapter 270. Why did he come? Qin Yining was slightly surprised. She put away the plum blossom net that had been washed clean and went forward to bow. This subject greets the emperor. Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu also followed suit and bowed. Yu Qiyan was sweating profusely as he leaned against a small tree and panted heavily. He waved his hand at Qin Yining and said, "Rise, there's no need to be so courteous." Qin Yining stood and respectfully bowed her head as she asked, "Why has the emperor come here?" Yu Qiyan panted for a while. When his breathing stabilized, he said, "I heard that your home was invaded by a mob and your family members disappeared." Zhen was very worried and ordered people to investigate. Only then did Zhen know that you and your family had moved here. Looking up at the white walls and black tiles of Ningyuan, Yu Qiyan remembered that this place was given to Qin Yining by Pang Xiao. He frowned unhappily. But he couldn't blame Qin Yining for anything. After all, she was just a weak woman. Also, if she didn't make arrangements early and brought her family Qin up the mountain, her family members would have been injured by the mob. Yu Qiyan laughed at himself. As the emperor, he was starving all day. He couldn't give Qin Yining anything. What could he use to pursue her? Could it be that he could fill his stomach with paintings and calligraphy? You can all leave. Zhen has something to say to Xuansu. Yu Qiyan's mood had calmed down and he waved his hand at the people beside him. Eunuch Lu and the guards bowed and left. Qiu Lu, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang had no choice but to leave and leave the space for the two of them. Yu Qiyan leaned against the tree and carefully looked at the person he thought about day and night. She had lost a lot of weight. Her small face was the size of a palm, but it made her eyes look bigger and brighter. Her nose and lips were very pretty. Even though she was wearing a coarse dress and her hair was simply tied into a long braid, her lack of makeup showed her natural beauty. She couldn't be compared to those beauties who wore makeup. Yu Qiyan found that he still liked her. When he saw her, his heart would still throb. He smiled helplessly. Now that the country was about to fall, he actually had the leisure to think about these things. It was just that the past few days had been too painful, and he had nowhere to vent the pent-up frustrations in his heart. Although Duke Nguogongli Mian was the commander-in-chief, he avoided the battle and repeatedly requested to restart the peace talks. His words actually had the intention of persuading them to surrender. How could the Yu Qiyan's dignity as an emperor be trampled on like this? However, the current situation did not allow him to do so. Yu Qiyan tiredly sat down on the floor and said, "You sit down too. Save some energy and chat with me." Seeing Yu Qiyan like this, Qin Yining lowered his guard a little. He found a rock 3 steps away from him and sat down. Yu Qiyan raised his head and looked at the leaves that were being blown by the wind. He leaned against the tree trunk and closed his eyes. After a long time, he slowly said, "Did you know that retired emperor disappeared yesterday?" Qin Yining looked at Yu Qiyan in surprise. Yu Qiyan tiredly said, "The eunuch who delivered the food to retired emperor found that the food was not eaten, so he thought that something had happened to retired emperor. However, after searching the entire palace, he could not find him. A perfectly fine person just disappeared into thin air. Your Majesty, do you believe that?" Qin Yining frowned. "What?" Yu Qiyan looked at Qin Yining. Qin Yining said, "A perfectly fine person would not disappear into thin air. If there was no one outside who helped retired emperor escape, then it means that there is a secret passage in the palace." "Secret passage?" Yu Qiyan sat up straight. "How did you think of this?" "Because when we captured Chao Guozhang, it was said that we found a secret passage in his residence. A crafty rabbit has 3 burrows. How could these old foxes not leave a way out for themselves?" Chao Guozhang and retired emperor had interacted for a lifetime. No matter how muddle-headed retired emperor was, he was still very scheming. Even Chao Guozhang had a secret passage, so retired emperor would not be unprepared. Yu Qiyan's reaction was slow, but he quickly figured out the crux of the matter. He said, "You are right. Why didn't we think of it?" He immediately turned around and called for an imperial bodyguard to come over. He whispered a few words into his ear. That imperial bodyguard bowed and quickly retreated. Yu Qiyan stared blankly at a place. He leaned against the tree trunk and sat in a daze for a while before saying, "It seems the retired emperor wants to take that large sum of money to Southern Yen." Qin Yining smiled and did not say anything. If retired emperor took that large sum of money to Southern Yen and wanted Lu Yingshi and the new emperor of Southern Yen to recognize him as the former emperor, then he was too foolish and naive. They would accept the money, but retired emperor's life could not be guaranteed. It was not easy for him to sit in that high and mighty position. Even if Southern Yen was only a small country formed by combining a few provinces and counties in Dayan, its area was still as large as Wanation and Goguryeo combined. No one would give up on it. While Qin Yining was silent, Yu Qiyan had already thought of many things. Finally, he closed his eyes and leaned against the tree trunk. He faintly said, "It seems that the heavens are not helping us. Li Mian, that old thing, has been persuading us all day long. We trusted him and even conferred his daughter as the empress. However, he is lazy and greedy for life, afraid of death. After leading the army for such a long time, he has only attacked once. And that was because he fell into the enemy's trap. Not to mention the loss of 20,000 soldiers and horses, if Grand Preceptor Qin did not rescue him in time, Li Mian, that old thing, would have died outside. The heavens are not helping us in Dayan. Natural disasters and man-made disasters have caused our talents to wither." Qin Yining now understood why the emperor came here. He was filled with depression and had nowhere to vent, so he came to find her to vent. At the same time, he already had thoughts of retreating and wanted to negotiate. However, in the current situation, negotiating was simply a dream. Qin Yining did not mind pouring a bucket of cold water on Yu Qiyan. The peace talks that Dukin mentioned are actually not appropriate. Oh. Yu Qiyan looked at Qin Yining with hopeful eyes. Qin Yining said, "If we want to negotiate, then we need to have the same status as the other countries. We also need to have conditions that can satisfy both sides. Only then can it be called a peace talk. To say something that will boost the morale of others and diminish our own prestige, Dezhou currently has an overwhelming advantage. What right do they have to negotiate with us? Even if they agree to negotiate, what conditions can we offer them that can move them?" This sentence instantly made Yu Qiyan feel as if he had been plunged into an ice cave. Originally, he still had a bit of hope in his heart, but at this moment, there was nothing left. That's right, he was now a stray dog. What right did they have to negotiate with him? However, if there was no hope, why did Dukan try to persuade him again and again? Could it be, that old thing Li Mian, I'm afraid that persuading us to negotiate is fake. Persuading us to surrender is real. He wants us to be disloyal and unfilial. How can we face the Yuchi family's ancestors? He wants us to be the ruler of a destroyed country. Yu Qiyan thought about the Emperor Emeritus who had disappeared with a large sum of money. He thought about what the Emperor Emeritus had said to him. He then thought about the faces of the people in the imperial court who were in danger. His heart ached as if someone was stabbing it with a needle. So what if we were born in the wrong time? Your Majesty, please do not be too sad. As long as we are alive, there is hope. Qin Yining looked down and softly persuaded. Chapter 271. When Qin Yining saw Yu Qiyan's expression, she knew that he had misunderstood. She just wanted to persuade Yu Qian to get over it and not hurt his body. However, Yu Qian seemed to have thought of something else. Your Majesty, this subject's daughter feels that nothing is more important than the Emperor's health. Qin Yining could only kneel and say softly, "You are the true ruler of Dian. Your existence is the reason why we continue to persevere." Yu Qian focused his gaze on Qin Yining. His gaze gradually softened from suspicion, but then he gave a bitter laugh. How can Zhen be worthy of being the ruler of a country in this state? How can I be worthy of being the reason why the people continue to persevere? It's because Zhen is here that the people have to suffer like this. When he came out now, he didn't even dare to use the Emperor's ceremonial guard. It wasn't just because everyone was too hungry to put on a show for him, it was also because he was afraid that if he came out in his dragon robe, he would be eaten alive by the people filled with hatred. Yu Qian asked himself several times. Was it right or wrong for him to continue to fight against the people of Dezhou? Now that there was already the southern Yan and the south, his country had already been divided into two. The reason why he was clenching his teeth and not relenting was because he didn't want to be the ruler of a fallen country and be recorded as a shameful event in the history books. He didn't want to be ashamed to meet his ancestors 100 years later. But when he saw the bark of the trees in the capital being stripped and the children curled up in a corner, he felt that he was the most selfish person in the world. For his dignity, he was sacrificing the lives of countless innocent people. Stand up. Zhen knows how loyal your family Qin is. Yu Qian shook his head with a bitter smile. It's just that Zhen is really confused right now. Qin Yining stood up and sat back down on the stone. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. She understood that talking about court politics would cause one to burn oneself. Yu Qian sat there in a daze for a long time. Qin Yining sat there with him in a daze. By the time Yu Qian came back to his senses, there were already sounds of men talking in the direction of Ning Garden. Yu Qian looked at Qin Yining questioningly. Qin Yining explained, perhaps the people who went into the mountains to hunt and dig for wild vegetables have returned. The Yu Qian smiled and said, "You're smart. You're with so many people, living near the mountains and rivers. You can take care of each other." He supported himself against the tree trunk and stood up. He patted the dust off his body and said, "Little Lu. Here." Eunuch Lu, who was standing in the distance, immediately came over. "Your Majesty. Give it to 4th Young Mississippi, yes." Eunuch Lu immediately called for the imperial bodyguards who had just escorted them over. Only then did Qin Yining realize that the imperial bodyguards were all carrying baskets on their backs. The 2 imperial bodyguards put down the baskets. Inside the baskets were a bag of fist-sized black biscuits that were commonly eaten in the army. There was also a bag of medicinal herbs that had already been packed. Yu Qian was a bit embarrassed. He smiled self-mockingly and said, "This emperor is really... This emperor knows that you have a lot of people here. This emperor was afraid that you would have starved long ago. Unfortunately, this emperor has gold and silver, but cannot buy food. Don't be disdainful of these. There isn't much dried food, so you should eat with the people around you first. You can take the rest back. As for the medicinal herbs, this is the medicine that this emperor ordered people to prepare to nourish your blood and body. It seems that your body hasn't fully recovered yet. Don't be too foolish and give everything to others. In any case, you should at least eat a few meals. Look at how thin you've become." Yu Qian sighed and shook his head. He was the emperor of a country, but he couldn't even let the woman he liked eat a full meal. No one could be in such a predicament. Qin Yining very gratefully knelt down and bowed. "Your Majesty's kindness in providing timely assistance, this subject's daughter will engrave it in her heart." "Thank you, Your Majesty." "Quickly get up. Seeing that she looked so weak from hunger that she could be blown away by the wind, her small face was deathly pale, and her lips had no color, Yu Yen felt a wave of pain in his heart. "Stay here and eat a flatbread first." Qin Yining looked at him with a bit of surprise. Yu Yen continued, "Your servant girls are quite loyal to you. Even at this time, they didn't abandon you and leave. Call them over and eat a full meal together. This is an imperial edict. This emperor will watch you eat. You can only go back after you've finished eating." Qin Yining lowered her eyes and thanked him emotionally. She then called Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu over. The four of them each took a hard flatbread and began to eat. Yu Yen looks at Qin Yining, who is like a little hamster. The mixed flour pancake, which is hard and cold, tastes like the imperial cuisine in her mouth. Yu Yan's nose twitches and tears almost fall down. This couldn't continue. If this continued, all the citizens of the capital would be buried with his selfishness. When Qin Huayuan opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar room. When he looked out of the window, all he could see was darkness. It was probably nighttime. He didn't immediately get up, but calmly recalled what had happened today. After eating a bowl of thin porridge, he felt dizzy and wanted to sleep. Then, he fell asleep on the table. When he woke up, he was already here. It seemed like the person who brought him here didn't want to kill him. At least, they didn't want to kill him yet. "You're awake." Just as Qin Huayuan was letting his imagination run wild, he heard the door creak open. A tall figure carried a tray with a big bowl on it. The person who came in later carried a candlestick. Because the candlelight was behind him, Qin Huayuan didn't see who it was until the person behind him put the candlestick on the table. Qin Huayuan sat up. His expression didn't change as he looked at the steaming hot yang chun noodles on the table. Then, he glanced at Pang Xiao, who was wearing patched clothes and dressed like a disaster victim. He suddenly sneered, "So it's you. What, did you bring this old man here to treat me to a meal?" Pang Xiao didn't care about Qin Huayuan's sarcastic words. He still bowed properly and said, "Father-in-law, this son-in-law was rude. This time, I really acted rashly. But if I let you know in advance, it would be inconvenient for me to act. Secondly, I didn't want to frame you for being unfaithful. So, this son-in-law used the medicine rashly. Please forgive me." Qin Huayuan's eyebrows twitched when he heard this. Father-in-law. Son-in-law. With the current situation of the two countries, how could the two families have such fate? This old man doesn't deserve it. Wang Yi, please be careful with your words. This old man's daughter is as pure as ice and as pure as jade. She has never been involved with anyone. What do you think of this old man's daughter by speaking like this?" Pang Xiao wiped his sweat and said in his heart, "It's over. This time, I've offended my father-in-law. They are indeed father and daughter. When they are fierce, they are equally difficult to deal with. Father-in-law, please don't be angry. It's just that Sister Yi and I have already made a lifelong commitment. In this life, I will marry no one but her, and she will marry no one but me." Ridiculous. Where do you get the confidence that she will marry no one but you? Qin Huayuan stood up angrily and flicked his sleeves. If it were in the past, she might have been moved by your actions. But after she saw with her own eyes those people who swapped children for food and experienced hell, do you still expect her to still not care? My daughter is a human, not a saint. Where do you get the nerve to be so confident in yourself that you can do whatever you want? Chapter 272. Father-in-law, please calm down. Pang Xiao saw that Qin Huayuan was enraged. So, he didn't say anything. He knelt down without any hesitation. He didn't care about his status as a prince. Moreover, he was the commander-in-chief of the great Zhou's tiger army. Father-in-law, if you are angry, you can reprimand me however you want, but please don't say such hurtful words. I know that Sister Yi will definitely suffer greatly in this war. Not only Sister Yi, but the people will also suffer greatly. That is why I forced you to come here today. Father-in-law, you have eyes and ears. How can you not know that your son-in-law has no choice? You feel sorry for the people and Sister Yi. You can scold me however you want, but please don't say that I don't cherish her. I feel like my heart is being twisted by a knife. Pang Shao knelt with his head down. The more he spoke, the more depressed he became. In fact, he couldn't blame Qin Huaiyuan for being angry with him. When he heard Huzi describe the tragic situation in Jingdu, he couldn't help but feel distressed. When he thought about how Qin Yining was in such an environment, with his injuries not yet healed and he had to starve all day, his heart ached. What's more, Qin Huaiyuan was in such a situation all day. Qin Huaiyuan looked down at Pang Shao. For a moment, he didn't know what to do with him. From the perspective of the country, this person was a sinner who wanted to trample on Dian. But from a personal point of view, this person was an outstanding young man. He was both literate and martial, and had both talent and appearance. He was sincere to his daughter. Moreover, in terms of planning and conquering, not only did he display his strategy, but he also had a benevolent heart that loved the people. This could be seen from the fact that he had resisted the imperial edict and refused to massacre the city. Qin Huaiyuan sat down tiredly. He rubbed his forehead and said, "How is Xihua City now?" Pang Shao was smart. When he heard Qin Huaiyuan ask this, he knew that his father-in-law wasn't so angry that he didn't want to acknowledge him. He wanted to give him a chance. Pang Shao immediately said, "Everything is fine in Xihua City. But I heard that 9 out of 10 houses in Xihua City are empty. Your tiger army has killed all the people there and hung their heads on high poles like lanterns." Qin Huaiyuan sneered. "Are you trying to fool me? Father-in-law, please understand. That was just a tactic to disturb the enemy. In fact, it was to save money for a wife, but Pang Shao would never say that." Seeing this, Huzi, who was kneeling beside him, also explained, "Master Qin, I'm sorry. My family's Wang Yi indeed did not indiscriminately kill the innocent. Those people who were beheaded in front of Xihua's city gate were originally criminals in the city. After Wang Yi entered the city, he investigated both openly and secretly, and recorded down the names of those rich and heartless people whom the common people called Flayed Skin, King of Hell, and so on. Once their crimes were verified, they were severely punished. Now you're saying that you're here to uphold justice." Qin Huaiyuan's anger had subsided a lot, but he still felt awkward looking at Pang Shao. He simply turned his face to the side and refused to look at him. Pang Shao heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. He thought that he would be able to keep his identity as his son-in-law. So, he kowtowed again and said, "Father-in-law, this son-in-law wouldn't dare to do such a heartless thing. But, a war is a war. We are standing on different sides. So, there will always be a time when we can't control ourselves." Pang Shao straightened his body as he observed Qin Huaiyuan's expression. When he saw that Qin Huaiyuan was not displeased, he continued, "Just like in father-in-law's heart, could it be that you have long given up on defending the city for the sake of the common people?" Qin Huaiyuan's heart shook when he heard this. He closed his eyes and sighed softly. On the one hand, it was whether the Dian royal family could continue to rule this territory. On the other hand, the common people in the territory sacrificed themselves for the power of the superior. How could he not have such thoughts? However, he was a muddle-headed person in the end, so he could not be the one to stand out. "Get up. As Wang Yi, the commander-in-chief of the army, how can you kneel when you see this old man?" Even if I don't kneel, you won't be appeased. If I put on airs when I see you, how can we continue to talk about this? Pang Shao cursed in his heart, but in the end, he breathed a sigh of relief. He stood up and brought the noodles over, saying with a smile, "Father-in-law, you've been unconscious for a day and haven't eaten yet. Eat the noodles first, and then we can continue talking." Qin Huaiyuan did not have much of an appetite. After being hungry for a long time, his stomach seemed to have become smaller, so he did not have much of an appetite. However, looking at the noodles that Pang Shao brought over, the broth was clear, the noodles were thin, and the noodles were evenly distributed. There were also green vegetables and green onions scattered on top, and the fragrance was very appetizing. Qin Huaiyuan could not let Wang Yi, who was from Dezhou, carry a bowl for him all the time, so he took the bowl and took a sip of the broth with a spoon. It tasted fresh and salty, and it could not help but arouse his appetite. He simply picked up his chopsticks and ate. When Pang Shao saw that his father-in-law was willing to eat the noodles he cooked, he felt a little relieved. When Qin Huaiyuan finished eating, Huzi brought over a cup of tea and said, "Old Master Qin, please enjoy." Qin Huaiyuan rinsed his mouth and said, "The noodles are cooked well. If father-in-law thinks it's good, then it's the good fortune of these noodles. Sister Yi also likes to eat the noodles I cook." When Pang Shao thought of Qin eating, the smile on his face softened a little. "You cooked it?" "Yes, my son-in-law's family ran a restaurant before he joined the army. I like to cook, so I learned a few tricks from my grandfather and the chef he hired." Qin Huaiyuan lowered his eyes and pondered. Pang Shao had already expressed his sincerity very clearly, so he could not continue to pretend to be a guest. Firstly, it would not benefit the two countries, and secondly, he was afraid that his daughter would be wronged. What if Sister Yi still had feelings for this brat? He could not interfere with their good fortune. Qin Huaiyuan stood up and said solemnly, "Just now, we were speaking in a private capacity. Now, let's talk about official business. Wang Yi, did you invite me here today for something important?" Pang Shao secretly praised his father-in-law's quick-wittedness. He treated the situation just now as a personal grudge, and it would not affect the relationship between the two countries at all. He was also happy to see this. He took out a thick letter from his bosom and said, "Grand Preceptor Qin, I invited you here in private today to find a way to survive for the people here. Please take a look at this letter." Qin Huaiyuan took it curiously. At first glance, the handwriting on the letter changed color. Qin Huaiyuan had a photographic memory. He could distinguish the handwriting of his colleagues. The handwriting on this letter was clearly Duke Ongwa's, Li Mian's. Thinking about Duke Ongwa's attitude toward the war, he had already guessed the contents of the letter. He hurriedly opened the letter and read 10 lines at a time. This was a letter of allegiance. The general content was that as long as Prince Xiongxuan said a word and agreed on a time, Duke Ongwa would be willing to open the city gates and welcome the Tiger Army into the capital. He was also willing to cut off the head of Grand Preceptor Qin Huaiyuan and offer it to Prince Xiongxuan to avenge Prince Xiongxuan and express his sincerity. Most importantly, at the end of the letter of allegiance, there was a long list of names. Every name on this list was written in blood. The handwriting of each name was different, and there was a handprint behind each name. It actually included 90% of Dian's military generals and nearly half of the civil officials. Qin Huaiyuan smiled sadly. How could he fight this war? He couldn't fight at all. "I understand," Qin Huaiyuan calmly put the letter back into the envelope. "This official still has to present this letter to the emperor." Pang Shao nodded and said, "Don't worry, Grand Preceptor Qin. This king guarantees that he will not kill a single person. He was guaranteeing that he would not kill the people. He was also guaranteeing that he would not kill Qin Huaiyuan." Chapter 273. Pang Zhao's people were very efficient. In the wee hours of the morning, they safely sent Qin Huayuan back to the city. Qin Huayuan stepped into the morning light and went to see Yu Qiyan without hesitation. He wasn't a person who would waste his life on an insignificant problem. Knowing that the situation was hopeless, he still wanted to die to prove his sincerity. After surviving under the Emperor Emeritus for so many years and experiencing so many ups and downs, Qin Huayuan had changed from a simple-minded person full of ideals to a person who knew how to think for his family. Since he knew that he couldn't defeat De Zhou, it was better to think about how to obtain the most benefits for the emperor. Yu Qiyan was in a very good mood today. Perhaps it was because he had seen Qin Yining yesterday. Even now, when he closed his eyes, he could still remember Qin Yining's docile appearance when he sent him down the mountain. Or perhaps it was because after seeing Qin Yining, some of the stubbornness in his mind had finally been shattered. Yu Qiyan felt as if he had been stripped of his heavy shackles. His entire being felt lighter from the bottom of his heart. "Your Majesty, Grand Preceptor Qin requests an audience. Quickly invite him in." Yu Qiyan had something to say to Qin Huayuan, so his voice was somewhat urgent. Not long after, Qin Huayuan quickly walked into the imperial study. He bowed and said, "This subject greets the emperor. May the emperor be in good health. You may rise. Please sit." Yu Qiyan had a smile on his face. Qin Huayuan thanked him and sat down in the official's hat chair that was brought over by the palace eunuchs. He said with a smile, looking at the emperor's expression, "It seems like there's something joyous today." Yu Qiyan smiled and said, "It's not that there's anything joyous. It's just that I've thought through some things. I feel much lighter in my heart. You came at the right time today. Even if you didn't come, Jin would have summoned you." Qin Huayuan saw that Yu Qiyan seemed to be very interested, so he cooperated and asked, "What did the emperor think through?" Yu Qiyan stood up and sternly said, "Yesterday, I went out for a patrol in plain clothes. I walked around the city for a long time and saw the tragic state of the city." Qin Huayuan saw that the emperor's brows were tightly knitted, and he couldn't hide the pain in his heart. He hurriedly knelt down and said, "This humble subject is incompetent and can't share your Majesty's burdens." "No, you've done very well." The Yu Qiyan helped Qin Huayuan up and said, "Grand Preceptor Qin has done a lot for me and the Dayan people. We can only blame the heavens for not protecting us. We didn't have any advantage at all." Yu Qiyan smiled bitterly and said, "When Imperial Father handed the throne to me, it wasn't because he valued my talent, but because he didn't have anyone else to inherit the throne, so he wanted me to take the blame for him. He hid a large amount of money and threw an empty shell to me. It was nothing more than wanting to leave some capital for a comeback in the future. Once the Dayan dynasty was defeated, he wouldn't want to be the humiliating emperor of a defeated country. At that time, the history books would only record that I was the last emperor of the Dayan." At this point, Yu Qiyan closed his eyes and clenched his fists. He said, "To be honest, my heart is full of resentment. I've never received any care from Imperial Father. As I slowly grew up, Imperial Father didn't look at me with the love of a father for his son, but with a deep fear. I know. He's afraid that I'll take away his position. The care he gives me is not as much as Imperial Uncle. Sometimes, I wish that the Dayan country was ruled by Imperial Uncle. Perhaps then I wouldn't have reached the end so quickly. But it's too late." Yu Qiyan's back was facing Qin Huayuan. He didn't want Qin Huayuan to see his cowardly tears. However, his thick nasal voice had already revealed the fact that he was crying as an emperor and as a man. Qin Huayuan knelt on the ground again and quietly listened to Yu Qiyan's confession. He also felt a wave of sorrow in his heart. When the Emperor Emeritus, that incapable ruler, was in power, he wasn't just afraid of Yu Qiyan. He was afraid of everyone. Yu Qiyan wasn't the only one who felt pain. As a subject, he had dedicated most of his life to the imperial court. Wasn't he still played by the Emperor Emeritus in the palm of his hand? If he wanted to kill him, he would be killed. If he wanted to, he would be praised. He could understand Yu Qian's pain. This was because he also felt the same pain. The pain of not being able to fulfill his ambitions was probably not much worse than the pain of not being able to get his father's attention, right? When I went out yesterday, I saw the scene of children being swapped for food. Yu Qian's voice started to tremble. This Shen saw with my own eyes an old woman in ragged clothes nibbling on a child's hand that was roasted until it was half cooked. This Shen really wished that she could kill herself. I didn't want to be the ruler of a fallen country, so I refused to admit my failure. I gritted my teeth and persevered until now. However, for the sake of my laughable self-esteem, innocent people were sacrificed. Grand Preceptor Qin, I was wrong. I was wrong from the beginning. Yu Qian turned around. There were tears on his face, but his eyes were unprecedentedly firm. From the beginning, I shouldn't have plunged the people into the abyss of suffering for my own selfish reasons. As the emperor, I can't seek happiness for the people. Instead, I have to use the people as a tool to build my status. How am I different from my father? We're both selfish and fatuous. Your Majesty, you've already done very well, Qin Huaiyuan persuaded. If you had ascended the throne 10 years earlier, Dian wouldn't have perished. When you took over, some things were already irreversible. You can't be blamed for this. Qin Huaiyuan's persuasion was actually exaggerated. After all, Yu Qian's talent was limited. However, this sentence was the most timely affirmation for Yu Qian when he was at his most self-denying. Yu Qian felt that as long as there was one person who could understand him, then he wouldn't feel so wronged when he was the ruler of a fallen country and saved the lives of the remaining people in the city. Grand Preceptor Qin, thank you. Yu Qian smiled, but his tears flowed like a spring. He said with a heavy nasal voice, I can't be selfish anymore. I can't let everyone be buried with my throne. I've decided to surrender to Dezhou. Your Majesty. Qin Huaiyuan's voice choked with emotion. Although he knew this would be the result, once this decision was made, the country that Qin Huaiyuan had spent most of his life defending would be destroyed. At the same time, the efforts and youth he had invested in it would be destroyed, as well as the great dreams he had when he was young and full of mettle. He was very sad and also very helpless. However, he wasn't a person who would be emotional. What was done was done. There was nothing he could do to reverse the situation, so he had to think of another way out. Your Majesty. Qin Huaiyuan wiped his tears and took out the envelope with trembling hands. He said, this official woke up early this morning and found this thing next to my pillow. When I opened it, it was really. Your Majesty, this official doesn't dare to speak rashly. Your Majesty, please take a look. Yu Qian was startled when he heard this. He hesitantly took the letter. After he opened it and carefully read it, his thin and pale face was completely devoid of color. Although he had already decided to surrender, the feeling of making his own decision and surrendering after being betrayed was really different. These people are really good. Good, good. They are my good officials and my good father-in-law. The emperor looked up to the sky and howled. He wailed, the generals have all rebelled. Half of the civil officials have rebelled. Even my father-in-law has betrayed me. My country has already fallen. What's the point of fighting? What else can I do other than surrender? Qin Huaiyuan was overcome with grief. He also closed his eyes and cried. The ruler and official hugged each other and wept bitterly. At this time, neither of them noticed that outside the imperial study, Empress Li Yanyan had quietly retreated. She gave eunuch Lu, who was by the emperor's side, a look and quickly left. Chapter 274. After Li Yanyan left the imperial study, she immediately called for her most trusted maidservant to come over and whispered to her, "Hurry up and go see my father. Tell him that the emperor already knows that he contacted the officials to prove his loyalty to the great Zhou dynasty." Grand Preceptor Qin just met the emperor in the imperial study and gave the proof of allegiance to the emperor. After the emperor saw it, he was furious and told him to take precautions. "Go quickly." The maid was so scared that her face turned pale. She quickly nodded and ran out. Li Yanyan lost all her strength and fell into a round chair. If the matter was exposed, what would the emperor think of their Li family? How would he treat her? As soon as this thought appeared, Li Yanyan took a deep breath and confidently suppressed it. The country was about to fall. The emperor didn't even have enough food to eat. How would he have the strength to deal with the Li family? The country was in danger and needed people. If the emperor dealt with the Li family, wouldn't he be afraid of being alone and without help in the future? Thinking of this, Li Yanyan's worried heart relaxed. What Li Yanyan didn't know was that after Qin Huaiyuan left the imperial study, eunuch Lu told Yu Qiyan in detail about Li Yanyan's visit. Yu Qiyan sneered, "You really think that Zhen is a soft persimmon that can be easily bullied? I just think that they are a bit useful." Eunuch Lu said, "Everything is under consideration, Your Majesty. This servant has absolutely nothing to worry about." Yu Qiyan thought for a bit, then called Eunuch Lu to his side and whispered a few words in his ear. After Eunuch Lu heard this, he immediately bowed and left to handle the matter. At the same time, Li Yanyan's maid had already sent a message to Guogong as quickly as possible. When Guogong heard this news, his entire body stiffened. His mind was in a mess and he couldn't say a word for a long time. The few aides beside him also furrowed their brows, their faces gloomy. "Guogong, what should we do? If the emperor finds out about our joint efforts, I'm afraid that the emperor will be furious." "That's right, High Duke. Your reputation can't be ruined at this time. We have to think of a countermeasure." Hearing the discussions of his advisors, Duke gradually calmed down. He sneered, "What are you afraid of?" When he stood up, there was no longer any trace of panic on Duke An's face. He sneered and said, "Now that things have come to this, what is there to be afraid of?" In the end, this old man's name wasn't the only one signed on the Pledge of Allegiance. As the saying goes, the law cannot punish the masses. Even if His Majesty wants to punish me, could it be that he can kill this old man and all of the court's generals? Without this old man, can His Majesty find another person to lead the troops? Without generals, how is he going to fight a war? Hearing Duke An's words, the advisors felt a bit more at ease. After careful analysis, all the ministers in the court were about to starve to death. The emperor was in power, but he couldn't even feed his ministers. If he wanted to punish them, what position did he have to punish them? "You're right, High Duke." A few of the aides also relaxed. Duke stroked his white beard. The sharp eagle eyes on his square face narrowed. "I didn't think that Qin Brat would have the ability to obtain this old man's Pledge of Allegiance. He even took the initiative to present it to His Majesty and complain about this old man. It seems that this old fox's age isn't wasted. This old man has underestimated him." Hearing this, one of the advisors laughed and said, "To say that he is loyal to Qin Huaiyuan is nothing more than that. He is just a shameless person fishing for fame. He took the initiative to file a complaint because he wanted to gain benefits from both sides. Not only could he expose the Duke in front of the emperor, but he could also gain benefits from the great Zhou dynasty. That Pledge of Allegiance, could it have flown over on its own? Wasn't it because he somehow got in touch with de Zhou? It's clear that although he said righteously that he couldn't give up, in reality, he already had thoughts of surrendering." Duke nodded in agreement. He believed that his talent wasn't inferior to Qin Huayuan's. However, everyone with the surname Qin was famous everywhere. There wasn't a single person in the world who didn't know Qin Huayuan, but how many people knew Dukan, Li Mian? The two of them had different ideas. For example, during the defense of the city, Princess An, Zhang Wenzhong, wanted to win and secretly advocated surrendering. However, Qin Huayuan advocated holding on and not giving up. As a result, Qin Huayuan's position went against the interests of Dukan's faction. More importantly, of their two daughters, one was the emperor's legitimate empress, but she didn't receive the emperor's love. The other was truly loved by the emperor. Even though he was forced to become a layman, the emperor still couldn't forget her. With all these factors added together, it was impossible for An Guogong and Qin Huayuan to ever get along. Currently, in Dian, Dukan was being suppressed by Qin Huayuan. When de Zhou's secret emissary came to secretly contact Dukan, he said that the emperor of the Zhou dynasty had promised that if they surrendered in Dian, all surrendered officials would be given preferential treatment and wouldn't bury any talents. In other words, if they went to de Zhou, they would still be officials. However, if this situation continued, even if they went to de Zhou, Dukan would still be suppressed by the world-famous Qin Huayuan. Why? It was already like this in Dian. If he went to de Zhou, would he, Li Mian, still be suppressed? Thinking of this, Dukan's eyes gradually became cold. We can't let the family Qin go to de Zhou alive. Didn't that person from de Zhou order us to secretly get rid of the family Qin Huayuan? Otherwise, we'll use this matter to wipe out the family Qin Huayuan and the family Qin Huayuan. Hearing this, the aides all became excited. A few of them began to think and help Dukan come up with a plan. The heavy rain in the early morning cooled down the raging heat of the autumn. The people in Ning Garden were all busily preparing utensils to store water. Thinking that perhaps after this nourishment, the wild vegetables and fruits on the mountain would grow a little faster, everyone's faces relaxed a little, which was rare to see. Qin Yining was busy with the work at hand with the Sun clan and whispering to each other when someone came in with a message. Benefactor, there's a master outside the gate. He says he's one of your father's men and that your father has something important to discuss with you, so he's come to see you. Qin Yining was stunned. His father hadn't come to the mountain for a long time. The two sides had lost contact for a month. Qin Yining was also worried about Qin Huayuan's situation. As soon as he heard that his father's man had come, he immediately said, "Thank you. I understand." Qin Yining put down the pot in his hand and said with a smile, "Mother, I'll go out and take a look. Perhaps father wants to talk to me about something." The Sun clan smiled reluctantly and nodded. "Go ahead. Since your father didn't say he wanted to talk to me, I won't go. I think it's Chi Tai. Help me ask about your father's situation in detail." Qin Yining naturally knew that the Sun clan was sad. Because ever since Qin Huayuan went to defend the city, Chao Yuqing had always been by his side to protect him. How could the Sun clan not be jealous? Qin Yining didn't want to comment on his father's private life, so he just smiled and said, "I understand. I'll be back soon. Go ahead. I know you two have a lot of secrets." Chapter 275. When Qin Yining and Ji Yun arrived in front of Ning Garden with an old oil paper umbrella, they saw Chi Tai, who was wearing a sapphire blue cotton robe and holding an oil paper umbrella. Seeing Qin Yining come out, Chi Tai quickly put down the umbrella and saluted, "4th Mississippi, quickly get up. Uncle N is an old man who has been with my father for many years. You must not salute me like this." Chi Tai's surname was N. But Chi Tai refused to listen. After saluting respectfully, he smiled and said, "Marquis ordered this lowly one to come and deliver a message to you. He said that he has something important to tell you." Marquis has been summoned by His Majesty to the palace to talk and is not free. I'm afraid that he will only be free at night. Therefore, he specially ordered this lowly one to come and tell you to wait at the foot of the mountain tonight. Marquis will come to see you. Qin Yining nodded and said with a smile, I know. Did father say what it is? Why can't he take the time to come up the mountain? Old madam and everyone in the family miss father very much. He's really too busy. To tell you the truth, this lowly one has been following master around. These days, this lowly one has been so busy that my feet hit the back of my head. As Chi Tai spoke, he looked around. Seeing that there were no outsiders, he lowered his voice and said, I'm afraid that His Majesty already has the intention to surrender. When it comes to such a big matter, it naturally involves many things. Marquis has been discussing with His Majesty all day long. Where would he find the time? Qin Yining nodded in understanding and sighed, it's really difficult for my father. I'll have to trouble Uncle An to take care of my father and remind him to pay attention to his rest. Yes, this lowly one will naturally pay attention. How is my father's health recently? How is concubine Chao? Qin Yining was concerned about Qin Huayuan and Chao Yuqing again. Chi Tai said with a smile, although master is hungry and full in the army, at least it's better than outside. Concubine Chao has been disguising herself as a man and staying by master's side to protect him. The two of them are like friends. They don't talk much, but they have a tacit understanding. Chi Tai's words were telling Qin Yining in a roundabout way that Qin Huayuan and Chao Yuqing still had not done the deed of husband and wife. Chi Tai was someone who stayed by his father's side all day, so he naturally wouldn't be wrong. Qin Yining secretly sighed for his mother's sake and said with a smile, I know. Thank you. I will wait at the foot of the mountain tonight. All right, then this lowly one will take his leave. I still have to return to the Marquis' side to listen to his orders. Qin Yining watched Qin's back then. It seems that His Majesty has decided to surrenders. And Yining, then? Yun said. Ji Yun said, although I shouldn't say this, after this servant heard that His Majesty has decided to surrender, this servant's heart was really relieved. Qin Yining said with understanding, I understand. Let's not talk about anything else. At the very least, once the war is over, there will be no need to besiege the city. We will also have a way to survive. As for the country's interests, it's not something you and I can consider. That's right. Moreover, once the war is over, Wang Yi will definitely come to look for Mississippi. Miss has suffered so much during this period of time. Wang Yi must be very distressed. Ji Yin thought about how much importance Pang Xiao attached to Qin Yining. Now, she could only imagine when the two of them met in the future. As a bystander, she felt that the scene of their reunion would definitely be very moving. Qin Yining touched his burning ears. Although his expression didn't change, his heart was inexplicably excited. Although this kind of excitement shouldn't come when the Dayan imperial court was about to be destroyed. However, Qin Yining felt that the country's foundation had already been hollowed out by the Emperor Emeritus's torment during his reign. Even if he didn't want to admit it, Qin Yining also knew that this kind of imperial court wouldn't last for long. Now that he knew that the Yuqi Yan had the intention to surrender, Qin Yining felt a burst of light in his heart. When the two of them entered Ningyuan, they saw that the Sun clan had been waiting for them for a long time. Qin Yining went to the Sun clan to tell them about Qin Yining's intentions. Then, he emphasized the situation of Qin Huayuan and Chao Yuqing when they were defending the city. The Sun clan's eyebrows relaxed when they heard this. Their worried hearts were also at ease. The irritation from the recent days of hunger also disappeared without a trace. They beamed with joy and asked, Sister Yi, you can't swindle people. How could I swindle you? This is what Qin Yining said just now. He follows father around all day, so he must know more than us. Unless Qin Yining is lying to me, I guarantee that there is nothing going on between father and concubine Chow. The Sun clan's face was a little red. She felt a little embarrassed when her daughter saw how jealous she was. She coughed and said, "Little girl, what are you saying? Is your mother the kind of person who is easily jealous?" "Of course not. I'm just worried for nothing." Qin Yining stuck out her tongue. The Sun clan couldn't help but laugh. Although the people in the courtyard were starving, they were in a good mood after hearing the Sun clan's and Qin Yining's happy laughter. Their irritation and fear also settled down on such a rainy day. Qin Yining spent the day as usual. When it was evening, he brought Ji Yun and Bing Tang out of Ning Yuan. As soon as he stepped out, he saw Mu Jinghu, who was as thin as a stick and dressed in a light blue robe, standing with his hands behind his back. "Are you going out?" Mu Jinghu's delicate features were sharper because of his thinness. His eyes were very clear. Qin Yining nodded and smiled. "My father is looking for me. Then I'll follow you in the dark." Qin Yining said guiltily, "If young Master Mu is tired, you can rest on the mountain. During this period of time, no one has enough to eat. No matter how high young Master Mu's cultivation is, you're still a mortal. If you don't eat, you'll starve. If you don't eat, where do you get the strength? I'm really guilty. This time, I'm just going down the mountain to talk to my father. You don't have to follow me." Mu Jinghu frowned and thought for a moment. "That's not good. I promised Fox to protect you. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Besides, I eat better than you. You're a little girl and you're fine. I'm a martial artist who cultivates both internal and external energy. How can I be weaker than you? Or are you worried that I'll eavesdrop if I follow you? Then I'll hide in the dark. If you don't want me to come out, I won't come out. Is that okay?" "Young Master Mu, what are you saying? Why would I be worried about eavesdropping? I'm just worried that you'll be tired." "Forget it. Since that's the case, young Master Mu can hide in the dark. If there's anything, you can also secretly listen to my signal." "Okay." Mu Jinghu nodded and smiled. "Then you guys can go." Qin Yining knew that Mu Jinghu would naturally have his own way to keep up with him. Thus, he held hands with Bing Tang and Ji Yun and walked down empty Qingchen along the winding path while carrying a lantern. When they reached the foot of the mountain, they saw a horse carriage parked on the road not far away. The wind lantern on the horse carriage swayed in the night wind. The air was filled with the moist fragrance of grass after the rain, making Qin Yining feel better. The three of them walked quickly towards the horse carriage. The people standing in front of the horse carriage also came forward to welcome them. Chapter 276. Greetings to fourth young mistress. The person who walked over with a lamp in his hand was Chi Tai. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Is my father in the carriage? Bring me there quickly." Chi Tai smiled and said, replying to young mistress, "When this little one received the order to come out, the Marquis had not yet left the palace. The Marquis asked this little one to bring young mistress to the residence that the Emperor had bestowed upon the Marquis. Based on our journey, the Marquis would be almost there. The Marquis had also prepared some dry rations for you. They are mixed flour pancakes from the army. He said that you should bring them to old madam and the rest when you return." Qin Yining was a little hesitant, but he still nodded. "All right, then let's set off quickly." Firstly, Chi Tai was her father's follower for more than 20 years. He was trustworthy. Secondly, she had Ji Yun and Bing Tang by her side. Mu Jinghu was also secretly following her. There was no need to be afraid of any trouble. Qin Yining, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang boarded the carriage. Chi Tai naturally sat outside the carriage with the coachman. The wind lantern swayed in the night. The carriage drove from the bumpy road to the flat and spacious road, heading all the way to the outer city. Now that the city was in chaos, the curfew was completely in vain. There was no one patrolling the city, and only the inner city gate was guarded. However, when they flashed the Qin Huaiyuan sign, these people respectfully let them pass. The road to the outer city was much more difficult to travel than the inner city. This was because there were many refugees who had fled from the disaster in the outer city. The starving commoners were bitten by mosquitoes, and their faces were numb as they huddled in the temporary shelters. They stared blankly as the carriage drove past them. Qin Yining looked at the scene outside the window and felt a wave of pain in his heart. He even began to pray that the emperor would surrender quickly. The faster he surrendered, the sooner the commoners' suffering would end. After a while, the carriage finally arrived in front of a courtyard. Qin Yining helped Ji Yun and Bing Tang out of the carriage and entered a black door. This was a small courtyard. The east and west wing of the courtyard were all dark, only the main room was lit. Hearing the sound of footsteps, a thin and delicate woman came out to greet them. Chi Tai smiled and said, "This is Sister Zhang. She is responsible for cooking for Marquis, and other people guarding the city." Qin Yining smiled and nodded at Mrs. Zhang. Aunt Zhang hurriedly bowed. After getting up, she said to Chi Tai cautiously, "The noodles you ordered are ready. Then bring it over first and let fourth young miss have some first. When the Marquis returns, I will cook for the Marquis again." In this day and age, eating porridge was already good enough. To be able to eat a bowl of noodles was truly a luxury. Qin Yining smiled. He thought that his father must have called him out to talk to him so that he could eat his fill. The group of people entered the main room, and Mrs. Zhang retreated. Qin Yining looked around the tidy and monotonous small room, then sat down on the stool beside the square table. He smiled and said, "My father has been living here for the past few days. Why isn't he in the barracks?" Chi Tai smiled and said, "Sometimes he is in the barracks. However, ever since Marquis Anghua was lured out by Dezhou and lost 20,000 people in one go, even Marquis Anghua himself almost lost his life, Marquis Anghua began to avoid fighting. Originally, we had barracks stationed outside the city gates to prevent Dezhou's people from directly attacking the city. However, Marquis Anghua did not allow it, so we dismantled the barracks. In any case, the city gates are closed, so there is no need for the Marquis to live in a tent." "I see. It has been hard on father. In the summer, there are so many mosquitoes and it is very hot. Living in a tent will definitely not be comfortable. It is more reassuring to live in a house." At this time, Mrs. Zhang came in with a large square plate. There were 3 steaming bowls of scallion and egg noodle soup on the square plate. On a slightly cold autumn night after the rain, the 3 bowls of noodles with egg and green scallion floating in the air exuded a burst of white steam and a tempting aroma. Qin Yining could not help but have a stomachache. Recently, she had been hungry often and always ate all kinds of wild vegetables. It was hard to guarantee that it would not hurt her stomach. Now that she saw this bowl of noodles, although she had a good appetite, her stomach was singing a different tune. Chi Tai smiled and placed the noodles in front of Qin Yining. He said respectfully, "Miss, please eat first. This was specially ordered by the Marquis. It was not easy to get these ingredients. The Marquis said to let you nourish your body." Then, Chi Tai smiled and said to Bing Tang and Ji Yun, "The Marquis said that the 2 of you have done a good deed by serving the 4th Mississippi. Each of you should eat a bowl of noodles." Bing Tang and Ji Yun smiled and thanked him. They took the noodles and placed it on the table at the side. Naturally, they could not eat at the same table as Qin Yining. Qin Yining picked up the bamboo chopsticks. Just as she picked up the noodles with her chopsticks, Bing Tang suddenly pinched her arm. Qin Yining looked at Bing Tang in confusion. Bing Tang looked at the noodles and shook his head. His clear eyes looked at Chi Tai, who was standing at the side with his hands hanging down. He smiled mockingly and said, "Was this bowl of noodles really specially prepared by the Marquis for our miss?" Chi Tai was stunned and his expression was a little unnatural. Yes, if it was not for the Marquis, this lowly one would not be able to get these noodles for Miss to eat. That's because the person who cooked the noodles was careless and accidentally put the knockout drug into the noodle soup. Our miss only needs to eat one mouthful of these noodles and it is enough to make her unconscious for 3 days. Ji Yun heard this and angrily rebuked, "What are you doing?" Mu Jinghu, who was guarding the side room, was so angry that he wanted to rush in. What a wastrel! In a year of famine, it was already good enough to have a biscuit to eat. It was rare to see steaming hot noodles, but someone actually recklessly put a drug in it. This was simply a waste of food. A waste of food. Qin Yining was still sitting on the bench with one hand behind his back. He waved his hand in Mu Jinghu's direction, indicating that he should not move. Mu Jinghu could only grit his teeth and bear with it and not come out. Qin Yining asked with a grave expression, "Chi Tai, did my father really ask you to bring me here today, or did you act on your own accord?" Chi Tai pursed his lips and suddenly revealed a mocking smile. "Fourth Miss, I, Chi Tai, have let down the Marquis and you in this matter. But for the sake of the stability of this country, there is no harm in you sacrificing a little." As soon as he finished speaking, a furious Ji Yun kicked Chi Tai in the stomach. Chi Tai screamed in pain and retreated a few steps before falling to the ground. He hugged his stomach in pain and panted heavily. Ji Yun pulled Qin Yining with one hand and Bing Tang with the other. "Let's go." Qin Yining also knew that there was no time to lose and immediately followed Ji Yun out without hesitation. Who knew that just as they reached the courtyard, they heard the door in front of them being kicked open with a bang and a group of masked men barged in. Qin Yining stopped in his tracks and said with a grave expression, "Who are you?" At this moment, Mu Jinghu was already hiding in the shadows between the side room and the side room behind Qin Yining. Qin Yining also did not know where Mu Jinghu was. He still had his hands behind his back and waved, indicating that Mu Jinghu should not come out. Chapter 277. Qin Yining did not understand why the old servant who had accompanied her father for more than 20 years would suddenly have the intention to betray him. Chi Tai had just said that she should sacrifice herself for the sake of the country's stability, but now, it appeared in her mind. She really wanted to know what Chi Tai wanted to do. "Miss, let's go quickly." Ji Yun pulled Qin Yining with one hand and Bing Tang with the other. She quickly led them to the backyard. When the men saw that Qin Yining's servant girl was actually a martial artist, they were both shocked and angry. They hurriedly waved their fists and chased after them. As they chased after them, they did not forget to threaten them. If Qin Yining hadn't experienced this kind of thing before, she would probably have been scared stiff at this moment. However, Qin Yining was very experienced at such a young age. She had negotiated peace, been hunted down, and had almost been eaten by the Empress. Therefore, the more dangerous she was, the calmer she became. Those people did not carry swords and were all dressed in commoners' clothes. Although their faces were masked, it could not hide their southern accent. It was obvious that the people who wanted to kidnap her this time were Dayan people. She was most worried about her father's safety now, not herself. She had an expert by her side to protect her, so her life should not be in danger. She hoped that Chao Yuqing could do her best to protect her father. Qin Yining thought about many things in her mind, but it was only a breath's time outside. They turned into the alley and saw that there was indeed no one guarding the fence in the backyard. Ji-yun stepped forward and kicked open the gate. Qin Yining and Bing Tang hurriedly followed, and the three of them ran into a quiet alley. The 10 men behind them hurriedly chased after them. However, there were many forks in the alley, and it was convenient for Qin Yining and the other two to hide. Mu Jinghu took advantage of the fact that there was no one around to catch up with Qin Yining and asked, "Why don't you let me take action? This matter is very strange. Young Master Mu, just follow me in secret. As long as my life is not in danger, don't come out." Mu Jinghu looked at Qin Yining's bright eyes in the dark and could not help but think of a wild beast in the middle of a hunt. The hair on his back stood on end and he thought to himself that this person was indeed a fox. He said, "All right, I'll listen to you." With that, he turned around and disappeared into the shadows. At this moment, the sound of orderly footsteps and horse hooves suddenly came from outside the alley, mixed with the sound of armor rubbing against each other. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Ji-yun and Bing Tang in disbelief. "It's the army. The only ones who can appear here must be our army." Bing Tang was dumbfounded. "Are you crazy? Why does our army want to capture us? Maybe they're here to capture those kidnappers." Ji-yun shielded Qin Yining and Bing Tang behind her. She leaned against the wall and quietly looked outside. What she saw caused her heart to tremble violently. The men who were chasing them just now were reporting something to the army officers who surrounded the alley. The two parties obviously knew each other. "Miss, this is bad. Those people are in cahoots. Then what should we do?" Bing Tang's voice was trembling. Qin Yining pursed his lips and thought quickly. Then, he said, "I have an idea, but I'll have to trouble Bing Tang." Bing Tang swallowed his saliva and nodded without hesitation. "Miss, please tell me. I'll listen to you." "Ji-yun, take my token now and think of a way to meet Wang Yi," Qin Yining said as he took off the red bean bracelet from his wrist. There was a new red plum bracelet on the bracelet. It was the same bracelet that was around Erbai's neck. Ji-yun took the bracelet and was puzzled. "Miss, do you want Wang Yi to come and rescue you?" "No, you don't have to say anything. You just have to tell him about the abnormal things that happened around me today. I feel that things aren't simple. They're not here just for me. Otherwise, why didn't these people kill me? Also, it's impossible that my father doesn't know about the mobilization of the army. There's an 80% chance that he's being held back by something. If you want to see my father and report the news, you might as well go and see Meng Shi. Besides, Chi Tai is my father's confidant. He should know about me very well. He knows better than anyone else that the only people related to me, other than my family, is Peng Jishi. Therefore, they want to kidnap me this time. Other than threatening my father, my family, or Peng Jishi. No matter what, you have to tell Peng Jishi to be mentally prepared." "I don't understand." "There's no time to explain. Hurry up and leave. Take this with you. He'll naturally trust you 100%. Tell him not to worry about my safety. I have young Master Mu secretly protecting me. My life won't be in danger. I'm here to see what the other party wants to do. You just have to ask Pang Jishi to help pay attention to the safety of my father and my family." "Okay. Since Miss says so, this servant will do as you say." Ji-yun knew that Mu Jinghu wasn't far from them. She also heard that Qin Yining seemed to have a complete plan. She carefully put away the bracelet and quickly left from the other side. Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand and said, "I'll have to trouble you. You have to share my joys and sorrows. If I knew that things would turn out like this today, I wouldn't have brought you out." Bing Tang shook her head. Although she was very nervous, she still held Qin Yining's hand and shook it. "This is nothing." Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand and hid in a crouch. There were 500 Dayan soldiers outside the alley. They searched every alley and gradually narrowed the encirclement. After hiding for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Qin Yining and Bing Tang hid behind a pile of firewood. Just as they stretched their necks to look outside, they suddenly felt something heavy hit their necks. Under the intense pain, their vision turned black and they lost consciousness. Qin Yining felt as if she had returned to the time when she was 7 years old. Her adoptive mother was seriously ill and she could only rely on the medicine she picked from the mountains. She didn't get better at all. She worked every day cutting firewood, but the copper coins she earned weren't enough to feed the two of them. When she went to the medicine store to buy on credit, the store refused. The shopkeeper ordered a 16 or 17-year-old shop assistant to grab her by the collar and throw her out of the store. She and her basket fell to the ground together, and the firewood and wild vegetables she picked up spilled all over the ground. She picked up the things and used her remaining copper coins to buy 2 meat buns. The buns smelled so good. She carried the buns all the way home and deeply inhaled the white and fat meat buns. The unique alkali fragrance of the white bun skin mixed with the faint fragrance of the meat and green onions made her salivate. The soup and oil seeped out of the filling of the bun and soaked the bun skin in 2 places. She carefully pinched a piece of bun skin the size of a fingernail and put it in her mouth. It smelled so good that it directly pierced into the depths of her memory. Her body trembled slightly. How did the bun disappear? Qin Yining woke up from her daze and heard the sound of wheels turning. She completely woke up and remembered what happened just now. She realized that she was in a carriage. She didn't immediately open her eyes. Chapter 278. Duke is truly quick-witted. In this way, Qin Meng's treacherous plan has been resolved. That's right. Originally, this old man was the first to surrender. Who knew that Qin Meng would steal the opportunity? Not only did he bring the proof of his allegiance to the emperor, but he also wanted to make a great contribution to Dezhou. He's benefiting from both sides. Don't tell me that all the benefits belong to him. His plan was good. Unfortunately, this old man found out about it first. The Zhou dynasty's secret emissary negotiated with this old man several times to get rid of Pang Zhishi. It seems that Pang Zhishi isn't doing well in Dezhou. Duke is wise. That Pang Zhishi is too arrogant. His merit is too high, but he doesn't know how to tuck his tail between his legs. He can't blame others. However, Duke's wisdom is truly unparalleled. I truly admire it. This is just a small trick. First, he used this little bitch to lure Pang Zhishi here. After killing him, he will shift the blame to Qin Huayuan. This way, even if we surrender, Qin Huayuan will bear the crime of murdering Prince Zhongshuan. At that time, even if he has 100 mouths, he won't be able to clear his name. This is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This old man won't have to deal with this group of people when I get to Dezhou. At the same time, it will help the Empress get rid of this little bitch. Qin Yining closed her eyes. She heard the 2 people's words clearly. She was already shocked. She didn't expect Dukin, Li Mian, to be such a despicable person. Also, who was the secret emissary from Dezhou that Dukin mentioned? Who wanted to kill Pang Shao? Qin Yining thought to herself. She continued to pretend to be unconscious, but she carefully closed her eyes. She found that the carriage she was in was extremely spacious. Bing Tang was like her. His hands were tied and he was lying at her feet. Dukin and a thin man were sitting with their backs to her. There seemed to be another person tied up in the corner of the carriage that was blocked by them. Qin Yining was just thinking this when she heard a whimper from the person in the corner. It was obvious that he had something to say. From the sound of it, it seemed to be Chi Tai. Dukin sneered, "TSK, I forgot about that. If he has something to say, let him say it." And Guigong's attendant went forward and pulled out the rag covering Chi Tai's mouth. Chi Tai took a few deep breaths and immediately asked, "Didn't you say that you wanted to use fourth mist to lure Pang Jishi over and kill that evil fetus, so that the enemy would be in chaos and we wouldn't have to surrender? How dare you lie to me? Dukin, to think that you're the Duke's father-in-law. You've been thinking of surrendering for a long time. How can you face the Emperor? How can you be worthy of being a Dayan? You actually told me to trick the fourth young miss into coming out, and even wanted to kill my master. You are despicable and shameless. Ha! Don't make it sound like you're loyal." And Guigong sneered, "Your master only has one daughter. No matter what the reason is, you've betrayed him by tricking his precious one out. But I never wanted to harm the Marquis. I'm doing this for the greater good of the country. For the Dayan. Ignorant." And Guigong closed his eyes and waved his hand casually. "Who put this filthy thing on the carriage? It's quite heavy for the horse to pull it. Throw it down and take its head." "Yes." The carriage slowly stopped, and the guards outside came up to drag Chi Tai out. Chi Tai cursed in horror, "Li, you'll die a horrible death. You'll die a horrible death. This old man is also cleaning up the house for your Marquis. I didn't expect that a dog that I've raised for more than 20 years would bite him back. He's really useless." The curtain of the carriage slowly lowered, and Chi Tai's cursing stopped abruptly. The carriage resumed moving. Qin Yining closed her eyes, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. She tried to calm herself down and not let the other party find out that she had woken up. Once Guigong found out that she was awake, he would suspect that she had heard a lot of their conversation. At that time, she would definitely be killed. The other party wanted to use her to lure Pang Xiao over. He might poison her, destroy her body, and let her die when he had enough. She believed that if a little girl like her could think of this, an old and cunning person like Guigong would also think of it. She could not take this risk. But now she could be sure that her father was fine for now. Before Guigong successfully tricked Pang Xiao to come and kill him, he would not reveal anything to her father. After all, her father had the reputation of Pan and the Wise. Ordinary people didn't dare to let her father know when they played tricks. They were afraid that he would infer the truth. Qin Yining pretended to be unconscious, and her mind started to think of a countermeasure. Not long after, the carriage slowly stopped. Qin Yining seemed to hear the sound of flags fluttering in the wind, and the sound of messy footsteps and armor rubbing against each other. She didn't dare to open her eyes to look, but she guessed that she had arrived at the military camp. Someone lifted the curtain of the carriage and respectfully asked Guigong to get off. Then someone entered the carriage and picked her up. Her nose was immediately filled with the sour smell of sweat from the unfamiliar man. The men in the military were not like them who relied on hot springs in the mountains. It was not easy to bathe in this kind of dry weather. Qin Yining endured the discomfort and continued to pretend to be unconscious. Then she heard Guigong order, "Lock this girl up in a tent alone. She is still useful for now. You are not allowed to touch her." "Guigong, you mean?" Qin Yining heard the excited voices of the people around her. She felt many unfriendly gazes on her. If she hadn't forced herself to relax, the vigilance she had developed over the years would have made her tense up and run away. "These bastards, are they going to suffocate to death?" And Guigong scolded jokingly. A few men beside him laughed. It seemed that these people were the trusted aides of Guigong. And Guigong probably wanted to use her and give her to these people, wake that little girl up. Tell her to go to the other side and send a message to Mr. Yun. Tell him that if he doesn't come, I will give his beloved girl to the soldiers in the army. Send someone to keep an eye on that little girl. Don't let her play any tricks." And Guogong gradually walked away as he gave his orders. Someone brought some water and poured some ice sugar over him to wake him up. Bing Tang's hands were tied, but her mouth was still free. As soon as she woke up and understood the situation, she immediately screamed, "What are you doing? Aren't you afraid that my Marquis will punish you if he finds out? If he wants to punish you, that will depend on the future. Right now, if you don't listen to us, we will kill you first." Someone told Bing Tang what Guogong had just said. Qin Yining, who was pretending to be unconscious, didn't know how Bing Tang responded and what expression she had. Qin Yining felt the person holding her begin to walk. Then he took her into a tent and gently put her down. The man's rough fingers that smelled of sweat and smoke lingered on her cheek. Since they dared to do this openly, the Yu Qi Yen, as the emperor, would not be accused of murdering an official's daughter. Her safety could be guaranteed. He didn't know what method Pang Xiao used to make the Yu Qi Yen personally come. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Qin Yining and Bing Tang knelt down and saluted. The Yu Qi Yen strode into the tent. He stood at the door with his hands behind his back and looked at Qin Yining and Bing Tang kneeling in front of him. He didn't immediately ask them to get up. Qin Yining lowered his head. He felt that something was amiss. If it was the Yu Qi Yen in the past, he would have asked her to get up first. Could it be that something had changed? Yu Qi Yen gritted his teeth and squeezed out a sentence, "Unrelated people, leave. No one is allowed to come within 10 feet of the tent." "Yes." Guogong led the guards and soldiers, and even called for Bing Tang. Everyone retreated and stood at a distance. Yu Qi Yen pursed his lips. After a while, he sneered, "What a good method. What a charm. Tell me, should I charge you with treason?" Qin Yining heard this and suddenly raised his head. He looked straight into Yu Qi Yen's eyes, which were filled with anger. Yu Qi Yen clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. He gritted his teeth and said, "Speak. This subject's daughter has never colluded with the enemy. I don't know how to reply to Your Majesty." Qin Yining lowered his head again in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Yu Qi Yen laughed with a hoarse voice and said, "This is hilarious. Initially, I was thinking of beating them at their own game, taking the opportunity to eliminate the murderer, Meng Zhishi, before surrendering, and consider it as having avenged great Yen dynasty. However, that boorish man actually dared to threaten this one." Chapter 280. Qin Yining didn't understand the reason for the emperor's anger. She hesitated for a moment before picking up the letter. On the envelope were the words, "To the Emperor of the Yen Dynasty." Every horizontal stroke of the character was slightly raised, and the structure of the frame was just right. It was extremely beautiful, and the strokes were as vigorous as dragons. It showed the confidence and arrogance of the person who wrote it. There was no need to ask to know that this was Pang Zhao's handwriting. Qin Yining opened the letter inside. As soon as she saw the contents of the letter, she almost laughed out loud. There were only 6 words on the letter: "Send the person back at sunset. Otherwise, we will attack the city at our own risk." The signature was an arrogant, swan character, and it even used Prince Zhongshuan's seal and Pang Zhao's private seal. Although it was a letter, the content was very concise. The seals used were not vague at all. A large red seal and a small private seal almost covered the entire letter. Especially the last sentence, "at our own risk," it was arrogant to the bone. It also showed her disdain for the Yu Qi Yen. It was no wonder that the Yu Qi Yen was so angry. His face was almost swollen from the slap. If Pang Shao attacked the city, how could the Yuchi Yen defend it? Anguo Gong had already brought all the generals and most of the civil officials to submit a letter of surrender. As long as Pang Shao attacked the city gates would definitely be opened. At that time, the Yuchi Yen wouldn't even have a chance to surrender. Because of the current situation, Pang Shao didn't care about his surrender at all. Whether the Yuchi Yen surrendered or not, it had no effect on whether Pang Shao could destroy Dian. Qin Yining pursed her lips, put away the letter, and presented it with both hands. Yuchi Yen didn't want to take it and sneered, "Are you very proud?" "Proud? This subject's country is about to cease to exist. What is there to be proud of? On the other hand, Your Majesty, do you know what you are saying?" Since the Yuchi Yen refused to take the letter, Qin Yining simply put down his raised hand and placed the letter on the table beside him. "Your Majesty just said that you knew that this subject's daughter was kidnapped by Anguo Gong and used this subject's daughter to lure Prince Zhongshuan into a trap." Although Yuchi Yen was full of anger, he still felt a little guilty when he heard Qin Yining ask him such a question. After all, he had claimed that he was the one who liked her, but he had allowed her to be kidnapped and used as bait. Yuchi Yen did not answer. Qin Yining said, "Does Your Majesty know what Anguo Gong's scheme is? He lured Prince Zhongshuan here so that after killing Prince Zhongshuan, he would bestow this subject's daughter to his personal guards and soldiers to play with, and then shift the blame of Prince Zhongshuan's death to my father." Yuchi Yen was shocked when he heard this. He slowly squatted down and looked at Qin Yining at the same level. Qin Yining knew that Yuchi Yen did not understand this, so he continued. "When this subject's daughter was kidnapped, she woke up as soon as she boarded the carriage. However, she pretended to be unconscious the entire time so that she could clearly hear the words of Anguo Gong and his aides. Anguo Gong had already contacted a secret envoy from Dezhou. That person promised Anguo Gong that as long as he cooperated with Dezhou's army, he could guarantee that all of the surrendered officials would be able to continue being officials after they went to Dezhou. Anguo Gong said that my father had already suppressed him in the Dian court. If Prince Zhongshuan was killed by my father, then after we surrendered, all of the officials would go to Dezhou. The emperor of the Zhou dynasty would definitely punish my father for his crimes. He planned to get rid of Prince Zhongshuan and my father's political enemies before he even set out. Your Majesty, are you aware of Anguo Gong's ingenious plan?" The last question pierced Yuchi Yan's heart. It was just like Pang Zhao's words, "You'll be responsible for the consequences." It shook his body and mind, causing him to fall to the ground. "Ha, ha!" Yuchi Yen sorrowfully raised his head, crying and laughing at the same time. "These are my subjects. They're not good at defending the city, but they're good at playing politics and scheming. They even included me in their plans. How laughable, how laughable. With so many subjects like this country's demise is not unjust. Me, the ruler of a fallen country, is not unjust. Ha!" Qin Yining knelt on the ground and looked at Yuchi Yen, who was crying and laughing with his head hanging to the ground. He didn't care that his dragon robe was covered in dust. He also felt very uncomfortable. Who would be willing to go to this step? However, the Yen dynasty's chronic illness wasn't formed in a day or two. It had been corrupted by the Emperor Emeritus for decades. To be honest, even if Yuchi Yen was an emperor who worked hard to govern, the Yen dynasty would only be able to struggle at death's door for a while. Yuchi Yen really didn't have the talent in this area. He wanted to, but he was powerless. In the end, he had already done his best. Your Majesty. Qin Yining sighed. He wanted to persuade him, but he didn't know how to do so. Yuchi Yen sat in a daze for a while. Suddenly, he stood up with a grunt. He was a bit embarrassed, but he said very politely, "You can stand up." This time, I thought wrongly. After knowing what Nguogong did, I wanted to beat him at his own game. That's why I had Grand Tutor Qin stay in the palace to talk with me. At this point, Yu Yen seemed to be afraid that Qin Yining would misunderstand. He quickly added, "Don't worry. Grand Tutor Qin and I have a teacher-student relationship. I won't harm him. I will definitely protect him. In the future, when I go to Dezhou, I will have to trouble you to put in a few good words for me in front of Prince Zhongshuan." Qin Yining stood in a daze. He looked at Yu Yan's fawning smile and didn't know how to react. In the end, he could only say, "Your Majesty is too polite. I won't forget that I am a citizen of the Yan dynasty. I also know that everything Your Majesty is doing is for the people of the capital, not for yourself." Yu Yen almost cried when he heard this. Yu Yen glanced at Qin Yining again. He patted the dust off his dragon robe and wiped his face. Then, he returned to his usual demeanor. He went outside and loudly ordered, "Someone, prepare the carriage." Not long after, someone rushed over with a cart pulled by a mule. There was no carriage on the cart, so it was obvious who was sitting on it. Yu Yen ordered Bing Tang, who had already been untied, and said, "Take your young miss with you." Then, he ordered a young eunuch, drive the carriage and send young Miss Qin to the other side. The young eunuch was so scared that he almost cried. He trembled and braced himself to accept the order. Qin Yining looked at Yu Yen in shock. She didn't expect that Yu Yen would directly send her to Pang Zhao's military camp. In the letter, Pang Zhao said that he was to send her back. What he meant was to send her back to her family Qin. He didn't ask him to do this. After thinking about it, Qin Yining understood. Yu Yen was trying to curry favor with Pang Zhao. This was simply. She didn't know what to say. Qin Yining and Bing Tang sat on the cart. The young eunuch took the whip and drove the carriage out of the city with a bitter expression. They crossed a wide open space and headed to Dezhou's military camp on the other side. Yu Yen watched as the city gates opened and closed. He watched as the cart went further and further away. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. The hatred in his eyes was finally replaced by helplessness. Then, he looked at Nguogong and the others who were standing on the side. Yu Yen didn't know how to deal with them. The people in the military had rebelled. If he ordered Nguogong to be punished now, he might even lose his life. Forget it, forget it. He had to survive first. Yu Yen could only return to the palace with the eunuch. In the Tiger Army's military camp, someone quickly reported to Pang Zhao, "Wang Yi, a mule cart is coming from the other side. There are two pretty girls sitting on it." Chapter 281. Qin Yining sat up straight and looked forward, searching for that familiar figure among the military tents and soldiers. As she got closer and closer, she could see the faces more and more clearly. She first saw the joyful faces of Huzi and Ji Yun. Then she saw the man in a black battle robe who rushed out of the central military tent and suddenly stood behind Huzi. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when she saw the usually domineering and arrogant person look so silly and overjoyed. Pang Zhao forced himself to stand still and not appear too unsteady. However, the surging emotions in his chest made his heart beat faster as if he had been fighting on the battlefield for an entire day. No, perhaps even if he had been fighting for an entire day, he wouldn't be as excited as he was now. Seeing Qin Yining smiling like a flower, Pang Zhao felt as if someone had scratched his heart and he also laughed. If it weren't for the fact that there were too many people around and he had to maintain the posture of a commander-in-chief, he would have already rushed over. Suppressing the joy in his heart, Pang Zhao pretended to be calm and walked over to greet him. Although the surrounding Tiger Army couldn't see the difference in their commander-in-chief's behavior, Huzi, who often interacted with Pang Xiao, was already secretly laughing. Wang Yi, you walked so fast. Wang Yi, your fists are clenched so tightly. Are you nervous or want to beat someone up? The young eunuch driving the mule cart saw a tall man with an imposing aura coming towards him. He thought that this was most likely the evil spirit with the surname Yun and was so scared that he almost peed on the spot. His hands and feet stiffly stopped the cart, jumped off, and knelt far away. His forehead touched the ground and he trembled like a sieve. How could Pang Xiao have the time to look at other people? At this moment, his heart and eyes were only filled with Qin Yining. You're here. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. He got out of the car and bowed. Greetings, Wang Yi. Pang Xiao could not bear to see her suffer even the slightest grievance. Without waiting for her to bend her knees, he had already lifted her up and pulled her to his side. From his bosom, he took out the string of red bean bracelet with plum flower tassels tied on it and put it back on her. His big hand carefully tied the string into a beautiful and delicate little bow. Qin Yining raised his head to look at his focused expression, and his eyes gradually became moist. Pang Xiao placed her hand in his large, rough palm and admired it carefully. He patted her head lovingly and said, "Let's go. We'll talk inside." After saying that, he took Qin Yining's hand and walked towards the barracks. Seeing their prince coming back while holding the beautiful lady's hand, the brave tiger army made way for the two of them at the same time. The young lady was delicate and weak, with a pink face and peachy cheeks. The brave tiger army made way for the two of them. When they got closer, they realized that the beauty in plain clothes was actually the one who came for the peace talks. Some people still remembered that their own Wang Yi had put his hands on his hips and said, "You'll be mine sooner or later." Jinghu Wei also remembered the scene when Wang Yi brought them into the capital and robbed the execution ground, in front of the Meridian Gate. Wang Yi was indeed a real man, a real man. What kind of woman couldn't he get? Looking at the current situation, the beauty had already submitted to Wang Yi. Good. Good. Wang Yi is mighty. Wang Yi is mighty. The surrounding cheers seemed to slow down by half a beat. The soldiers clapped their hands and cheered loudly. The crowd was in high spirits. Pang Xiao didn't stop them. He even smiled and said to the deputy generals nearby, "This is your Wang Fei. You can come and pay your respects to her after the wedding." "Yes, Wang Yi." The deputy generals smiled and saluted. "When the time comes, we will send a lot of money." Pang Xiao laughed heartily and pulled Qin Yining's hand into the tent. The cheers outside the tent became even louder. Qin Yining heard Huzi say from outside, "Go away, go away. Do what you need to do. Don't cause trouble here. Have you finished what Wang Yi asked you to do?" Qin Yining was so embarrassed that he wished he could find a hole to hide in. He didn't know what these people would say about the situation inside the tent. "What were you saying just now? When did I say I was going to marry you?" Qin Yining pulled back his hand and turned around, refusing to look at him. "I'll go lift the curtain." "Wait." Pang Xiao looked at her thin back and hugged her from behind. His lips landed on her earlobe, neck, and the side of her face. "If you don't marry me, who are you going to marry?" "I don't care. Everyone knows you're mine. You were sent here by your emperor. Even the people of the Yan dynasty won't say no." Qin Yining was trapped in Pang Xiao's arms. His lips were a bit dry and peeling. They rubbed against her delicate and sensitive skin on her ear and neck, causing her to shiver. Qin Yining's body trembled. He twisted his body and said, "Don't be like that. There are people outside. So you're saying that when there's no one around, I can do whatever I want?" Pang Xiao stared blankly for a moment before letting out a low chuckle. He blew a breath of hot air into her reddened ears, causing her to bury her face in his shoulder. Qin Yining's face was completely red. Your mouth is getting worse. I don't want to talk to you. If you don't want to talk, then do something else. Since you said my mouth is bad, then check it for me. See if it's really bad. Pang Xiao held her shoulders and lowered his head to search for her lips. He impatiently pressed his lips against hers and sucked madly, searching for every sensitive spot on her lips. It wasn't their first kiss, but this was Pang Xiao's most passionate kiss. Qin Yining was like a drifting leaf, being tossed up and down by huge waves. She instinctively reached out her arms and wrapped them around his strong neck. Pang Xiao's soft and tender body was pressed tightly against his body that was as hard as iron. Pang Xiao's hands caressed her back, and then he held her butt and lifted her up. In order not to fall, Qin Yining could only clamp his waist with her legs. However, this posture was too shameful. She was shy, embarrassed, and scared. However, her lips were occupied, so she could only punch his shoulders with her fists and push him hard. Pang Xiao was both physically and mentally happy from being beaten by her. No matter how much her hands hurt, he refused to let go. Only when her pink lips were slightly red and swollen did he let go of her. He even pecked her 2 more times as if he was not satisfied. Qin Yining's face was bright red as she panted. She lowered her eyes and didn't look at him. She said softly, "Why aren't you letting go of me?" Her voice was sweeter and gentler than usual. With a beauty in his arms, her breath smelled like orchids. She was so shy that Pang Xiao's heart was like a monkey and his mind was like a galloping horse. He really wanted to do what he wanted to do. However, he wasn't the kind of person who fooled around. He regarded Qin Yining as a treasure, so he naturally wouldn't look down on women like most men nowadays. His respect for Qin Yining made him hold back his feelings. Okay. If you keep hugging me, something will happen. Pang Xiao placed her on his bed and didn't forget to tease her. He kissed her forehead and sat down next to her. Qin Yining silently moved a bit to the side and said, "I didn't think you would use this kind of method to let me go. Aren't you afraid the Emperor will hate you?" Chapter 282. Why would you think that? Qin Yining held Pang Xiao's large hand with heartache. Her fingertips slid over his rough palm and fingertips. Looking at the new scar on the back of his hand, her eyes flashed with pity. "I know you are in a difficult position. How can I blame you for this? No matter how high your status is, you are not the one with the highest status. There are many things that are beyond your control. Also, this year's drought is a natural disaster. You are just an ordinary person. How can you blame yourself for something that is beyond your control?" Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining with a smile. His slanted phoenix eyes seemed to contain a pool of warm spring water. He knew that with Qin Yining's intelligence and conduct, she would definitely understand him. However, Pang Xiao couldn't help but be moved when he heard such considerate words from her mouth. "Sister Yi," Pang Xiao reached out and pulled Qin Yining into his arms. Without any lust, he kissed her forehead. "You are so good." His voice was low and pleasant, but it was slightly hoarse because he was moved. His warm breath blew into Qin Yining's ears. Qin Yining's ears were numb and hot, but she didn't want to move away. She just obediently leaned into his arms and closed her eyes to enjoy this moment of peace and tranquility. She and Pang Xiao hadn't had a chance to be together like this for a long time. They just held each other like this and didn't think about anything else. They put down all their burdens. At this time, he wasn't the Prince Zhongshuan of Dezhou, and she wasn't the daughter of the Grand Preceptor of Dian. They were just a man and a woman who loved each other. The Emperor had decided to surrender. Then they didn't need to be placed on the opposite side and didn't need to be tied down by so many worldly things. Perhaps it was because she was too relaxed, the exhaustion from not having much rest last night came back. Qin Yining was sleepy and tired. She wrapped her arms around Pang Xiao's waist and said in a muffled voice, "I will sleep for a while. I've asked someone to prepare the ingredients. I'll cook a bowl of noodles for you now. Eat your fill before you sleep, okay?" Pang Xiao knew that Qin Yining had been starving during this period of time. Her heart ached. How could she bear to let her sleep on an empty stomach? Qin Yining shook his head and muttered, "No." His breathing gradually stabilized, and he fell into a deep sleep as he spoke. Pang Xiao lowered his head and looked at the person who could fall asleep in his arms. Looking at the shadows under her eyes and her small face with sunken cheeks, his heart ached. He carefully carried her up and laid her flat on his wooden bed. He removed her embroidered shoes and covered her with a thin blanket. Her long hair was spread out on the blue mattress, and the glossy black satin had now dimmed. Her white face appeared even paler under the contrast of the dark pillowcase. She ate half a flatbread and a bowl of porridge. After the meal, Qin Yining and Pang Xiao talked about serious matters. "Before I came here, I was kidnapped by Duke Ongwa." When Duke Ongwa was talking, he accidentally revealed that he had connections with Dezhou's secret envoy. Secret envoy? Pang Xiao raised her eyebrows in surprise. How could there be a secret envoy? How come I, the commander-in-chief of the Southern Tiger Army, didn't know about this? Qin Yining sneered, "Do you know what the secret envoy and Duke Ongwa talked about? The secret envoy wanted to kill you with a borrowed knife. He wanted to use Duke Ongwa to get rid of you, and then frame my father with the crime of murdering the prince. Since there was such a person, the other party naturally wouldn't let you know. Could it be that they wanted you to take precautions early on?" Pang Xiao naturally knew that Qin Yining was right. He nodded and rubbed the bridge of his nose with his index finger. "I understand what you said. Then do you know who the mastermind behind this could be?" Pang Xiao touched her forehead with his large hand and smiled. "Silly girl, think about it. If I die in battle, who will benefit the most? Who will benefit the most because of my bad luck? If you think about it this way, it's clear who wants me dead." Qin Yining had already engraved the theory that the Ziwei Emperor's star didn't descend the throne into his heart. The Zhou dynasty's emperor must be afraid of this calculation. And if Pang Xiao died in battle, the ones who would benefit the most would be Dezhou's new emperor and the officials who surrendered to Dezhou from Beijing. Of the two, the former was to get rid of future troubles, the latter was because of a conflict of interest. Pang Xiao's existence was equivalent to fiercely suppressing them. If these people wanted to have a chance to rise up in court, getting rid of Pang Xiao was definitely their best choice. Qin Yining saw that Pang Xiao was calm and didn't show any emotion on his face. He couldn't help but praise him in his heart. Chapter 283. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining looked at each other and immediately stood up to welcome him. Mu Jinghu's complexion looked very good. Although he had lost a lot of weight after accompanying Qin Yining on the mountain, his cultivation level was very high. After eating 2 full meals and a night of rest, he already looked very energetic. Pang Xiao smiled as he approached Mu Jinghu and patted his shoulder affectionately. "Did you have a good rest yesterday?" Mu Jinghu smiled and nodded. "Very good. Your situation here is much better than in the city. I haven't had a full meal in a long time. I had a full meal yesterday, so of course I slept well. You, on the other hand, did you sleep well last night?" Mu Jinghu was just purely curious. He couldn't help but look at Qin Yining who was beside him. His gaze was too clean, but how could Qin Yining not understand when he looked at him like that? Qin Yining's face instantly turned red. He wished he could hide immediately. Yesterday, she had directly slept in Pang Xiao's tent. Who knew what the people outside would think? Pang Xiao naturally thought of this as well. He turned to look at Qin Yining's blushing cheeks and coughed twice. You stupid blockhead, how could you say that? Mu Jinghu was a kind person. He also felt that he had gone overboard with his words. He didn't persist on this topic and said seriously, I'm here to say goodbye to you. Now that your battle is over, there won't be any problems without me around. I'm going to Taidan to look for my martial uncle. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were shocked and they heard this. Tian Jizi was in Taidan. Qin Yining could not help but recall that Mu Jinghu had mentioned that the greedy wolf star was in Taidan. Tian Jizi had gone to Taidan. Could there be a connection between the two? Pang Xiao nodded and said, Okay, thank you for your help this time. If there's anything you need me to do in the future, just tell me. I won't refuse. What are you talking about? I lost to you this time, so it's what I should do. It's not like I helped you. Mu Jinghu was an honest person. In his eyes, Pang Xiao was not a bigwig, but an ordinary friend. Therefore, he did not flatter or ask for credit, and his attitude was very natural. The more he did not take it to heart, the more precious his sincerity was. Pang Xiao patted his shoulder and said with a smile, When are you leaving? We're planning to leave soon. Then I'll order people to prepare rations for you and give you 2 good horses. Mu Jinghu smiled and nodded, okay. Qin Yining looked at the interaction between the two and could not help but smile. To have such a sincere friend was Pang Xiao's fortune. At this time, Qin Huayuan was frowning slightly. He sat with his head down on the armchair next to the emperor and chatted with him. The emperor had gone to find the empress after returning to the palace yesterday. Then, there were rumors that the emperor and the empress had quarreled and that the emperor had whipped the empress. Qin Huayuan was not a person who would easily believe rumors. However, he had already seen through Yu Qiyan's personality. When Yu Qiyan saw that proof of allegiance, he was so angry that he could not control himself. If he was provoked by external forces, Qin Huayuan would not be surprised no matter what crazy things the emperor did. Qin Huayuan watched as Yu Qiyan rambled on, as if he had something to say to him but could not open his mouth. Thus, he did not rush him and just listened quietly with a smile. Yu Qiyan had already talked about the local customs of Dezhou. There was nothing else to talk about. Thus, he used the action of drinking tea to hide his awkwardness. In the end, no matter how much he rambled on, he still had to politely send Qin Huayuan out of the palace. I've kept you company in the palace these 2 days. Perhaps I've delayed a lot of your matters. Yu Qiyan's tone was very polite. Qin Huayuan was very surprised. When the emperor was still in seclusion, he treated him with great courtesy. However, after stepping down from the throne, he was the ruler of a country. His status was different, so his manner was naturally different. It was rare for him to be so polite. Qin Huayuan quickly stood and bowed, Your Majesty, please forgive this humble subject. Grand Preceptor Qin, what are you saying? Yu Qiyan also stood and said somewhat awkwardly, This Jin actually has something to tell Grand Preceptor Qin. Yes. Your Majesty, please instruct me. Qin Huayuan lowered his eyes and cupped his hands. Yu Qiyan deliberated and said, Duke Ongwa used the people around you to deceive 4th young Mississippi. He intended to use her as a hostage to lure Prince Zhongshuan into killing her. After Jin investigated, Jin learned that they were in contact with the people of Dezhou. Qin Huayuan's heart jumped when he heard this. The people around him who had enough status to deceive Qin Yining, other than Qi Tai, he could not think of anyone else. No wonder he had not seen Qi Tai for 2 days. Qin Huayuan said calmly, So that's how it is. Only these 4 words. Yu Qiyan was originally waiting for Qin Huayuan to ask. That way, he could take the opportunity to explain. Who knew that Qin Huayuan would only say this? How was he supposed to continue? Yu Yen could only cough twice to hide the embarrassment in his heart. He continued, when Jin received the news, fourth young miss was already in the military camp. Jin went to see if fourth young miss was well. Because they threatened Prince Zhongshuan, Prince Zhongshuan wrote Jin a letter. Yu Yen paused. In the end, he did not say what he was thinking because he was too embarrassed. He only said, Jin felt that Prince Zhongshuan was sincere, so Jin ordered people to send fourth young miss to Prince Zhongshuan. Jin also knew that the two of them had a good relationship. After Dai's surrender, those of us who used to be core members of the Yan dynasty will have to go to Dezhou. When the time comes, with Prince Zhongshuan's relationship, it will be easier to do things. Qin Huayuan nodded, Your Majesty is wise. From the emperor's hesitant attitude and the way he tried to cover it up, Qin Huayuan had already guessed the general situation. Moreover, the emperor was probably involved in this matter from the beginning. Otherwise, he would not have used the excuse of chatting to detain him in the palace for 2 days. Pang Zhao's letter to the emperor probably scared him. Qin Huayuan's heart was boiling with anger. However, the matter was already in the past. Even if he pursued it, it would be useless. Although they had decided to surrender, everything had not yet begun. Yu Yen was still the emperor and still had the power to kill. Qin Huayuan felt that there was no need to shed all pretense of cordiality with him over a matter that was already in the past. Moreover, he believed in Pang Zhao's feelings for Qin Yining. Qin Yining would have a better life if he went to Pang Zhao's side. It would be better than suffering in the mountains. However, Qin Huayuan no longer had a good impression of the Yuqi family. However, he did not show his dissatisfaction. He still had his usual respectful and humble appearance. He saluted and said, Your Majesty is wise. This way of handling things is also good. Prince Zhongshuan is the sworn brother of the Zhou dynasty's emperor. Presumably, being on good terms with him is also beneficial to Your Majesty. Qin Huayuan did not show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. Instead, he said such understanding words. This made Yu Yen feel embarrassed. He attentively spoke with Qin Huayuan for a while before ordering his bodyguards to escort Qin Huayuan back to Ningyuan. He also asked the bodyguards to bring some food for Qin Huayuan. After Qin Huayuan thanked the emperor for his kindness, he immediately returned to Ningyuan to reunite with his family. Because Qin Yining had been missing for 2 days, the people on the mountain were almost crazy with worry. The Sun clan had already cried over and over again. When they saw Qin Huayuan and Chao Yuqing return, they hurriedly rushed over and anxiously said, You're finally back. Sister Yi is missing. Chapter 284. Sun Clan's daughter buried her face in Qin Huayuan's arms, and her tears stained his clothes. That day, Chitai came back and said that you wanted to see Sister Yi, so you asked Sister Yi to go to the foot of the mountain at night to see you. I thought that Chitai had been with you for so many years, so it was impossible for him to be unfaithful, so I let Sister Yi go. Who knows? Not only was he lost, but the people we went out to look for also found Chitai's body. He was stabbed in the neck and died. Only then did I realize that Sister Yi might have been kidnapped. She is such a good daughter, but I am useless as a mother. I let her suffer all day, and in the end, I couldn't even keep an eye on her. Qin Huayuan hugged Sun Clan's daughter, who was thin and bony, and said with heartache, Don't worry, don't cry. Sister Yi is all right. Really? You are not lying to me. Sun Clan's daughter raised her face and looked at Qin Huayuan. Of course, I only have one daughter, and her safety is so important. How can I lie to you about this? Qin Huayuan wiped her face with his sleeve and comforted her. Come, let's go in first, and I will tell you slowly. Sun Clan's daughter had always known Qin Huayuan's character. If he said that Qin Yining was all right, then he should be all right. Only then did she realize that she had thrown herself into Qin Huayuan's arms and cried in public. Her face turned red in an instant, and she hurriedly took a few steps back. Qin Huayuan took Sun Clan's hand and walked in front indifferently, greeting the people on the mountain along the way. Chao Yuqing, on the other hand, lowered her head and followed the two of them upstairs. When Madame Dowager heard that Qin Huayuan was back, she was very happy. She held Mammy Qin's hand and came out to greet him. My brother Meng, you are finally back. Qin Huayuan smiled and went forward to salute. Mother, your son greets you. Get up, get up. I missed you so much. Old Madame grabbed Qin Huayuan's arm and sized it up. Then, she said with heartache, you've become tanned and thinner. Qin Huayuan smiled and greeted second old master, third old master, and other family members. The Sun Clan finally couldn't help but ask anxiously, Marquis, where is Sister Yi? Upon hearing her question, old Madame finally remembered that Qin Yining had gone missing. Qin Huayuan went into the room with his family and told them what the emperor had told him. Even if he had guessed the details, it was still related to the face of the country, so he didn't want to reveal it. In the end, he only said, His Majesty has decided to surrender to Dezhou. He will be busy these days. The sound of exhaling could be heard from the room. Although everyone felt the sorrow of the fall of their country, they were all relieved. Qin Han said, Eldest uncle, His Majesty has agreed to surrender. Will the Dezhou people outside the capital withdraw? They will. Then will they slaughter everyone in the city? Second Madam was very worried. Qin Huayuan shook his head and said with a smile, the emperor of the Zhou dynasty is a very shrewd person. He knows how to win people's hearts. I think that at this time, not only will he not slaughter the people in the city, he will also transport food as soon as possible. Everyone understood that even the retired emperor of Great Yan dynasty did not care about the life and death of his own people, and had hidden away all the silvers used to buy food. If the emperor of Great Zhou was able to provide food to his people, such a strong contrast was more than enough to give the people in the capital a good impression of the emperor of Great Zhou. These starving people didn't care about the fall of their country. They only cared about whether they could survive or not. Not to mention the commoners, even the members of the Qin family were overjoyed. Only old Madame's expression wasn't very good. A few days ago, she had just eaten the little rabbit that Prince Zhongshuan gave to Qin Yining. She even used all her strength to mock Qin Yining. Who would have thought that the emperor would directly send Qin Yining to Prince Zhongshuan's side? If the Dian dynasty surrendered to the Zhou dynasty, Qin Yining would very likely become Prince Zhongshuan's concubine in the future. If it was better, she might even become a side consort. She would become a noble lady in the Zhou dynasty. But what about them? They were the family of a surrendered official. Their life and death were in the hands of others. One sentence could decide their future, that is to say, Sister Yi is still very much liked by Prince Zhongshuan. Old Madame's voice was a bit hoarse. Han's second young mistress also looked at Qin Huayuan with her watery eyes. Obviously, she and old Madame thought of the same thing. She now regretted her actions. She really shouldn't have urged old Madame to eat Qin Yining's pet. That little rabbit was just like what Qin Yining said. It didn't have any meat on its body. It wasn't even enough to fill the gaps between her teeth. At that time, she only wanted to eat a little bit. She even secretly scolded Qin Yining for being pretentious. She was about to starve to death and still refused to eat that little rabbit. Who would have thought that the rabbit was a love token that Prince Zhongshuan gave to Qin Yining? And Qin Yining was going to become a Wang Fei. Han's second young mistress regretted so much that her intestines turned green. Qin Huayuan saw that his old mother and niece-in-law had this kind of expression. He guessed that something must have happened that he didn't know about. He said calmly, Prince Zhongshuan likes Sister Yi a lot. If there are no accidents, she will become a Wang Fei. Old Madam laughed dryly. That's good, that's good. In the end, it's our family Sister Yi who has the ability. In the future, we will have to rely on her. Han's second young mistress also nodded with a smile. However, that smile was stiff. Even Qin Han, who was supporting her at the side, could see some clues. It was just that Qin Han didn't ask directly. Qin Huayuan peacefully stayed on the mountain for 2 days. In these 2 days, the tiger army that was guarding the city gates had indeed withdrawn. The city gates opened wide and allowed the common people to enter and exit like before. The refugees who were struggling at death's door stumbled outside to find a way out. Many people were so hungry that they didn't have any strength left. They were rolling and crawling. At this time, not far from the city gates, a tiger army soldier shouted loudly, "Your Majesty de Zhou takes pity on the disaster victims and decrees that there will be 2 meals a day. There will be congee spots set up in front of the city gates and all over the city. Everyone can come and eat congee." As that person's voice fell, someone rushed over with a carriage. They put down a big pot, rice, firewood, and other things and started to make a fire to cook congee. The fragrance of the rice spread far and wide. How could the day's disaster victims withstand the aroma of the food? They all rushed towards the congee stall. Among them, there was no lack of people who were hungry and had no strength left. After being squeezed, they fell down and couldn't get up again. But in the face of hunger, who could care so much? It was good enough that they could survive. How could they care about what was under their feet? Therefore, no one heard a hoarse voice under their feet. It was more out of breath than in, berating, "All of you, get lost. Take your stinky feet away. Zhen, we'll kill you all. You dare to commit regicide." No one heard his voice, but countless feet stepped on his back, leaving a few more footprints on his tattered clothes, which were so dirty that the original color of his clothes couldn't be seen. He wanted to cry out in pain, but he couldn't make a sound. When he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood. He wanted to get up, but he didn't have the strength. His vision gradually blurred. There was only one signal left in his mind, and that was pain. The pain of broken bones and tendons. The congee stall was not far away. He stretched out his dirty arms, but in the end, he didn't get to eat a mouthful of congee. Chapter 285. Although Qin Yining lived in the Tiger Army's barracks, he didn't have much time to meet with Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao had to take charge of the reconstruction work in the city, help the victims settle down, distribute food, maintain order, clean up and burn the corpses, arrange for the military doctor to lead the doctors in the city to take care of the epidemic, and report to the Zhou Emperor to appoint officials. All of these tasks were no less tedious than commanding the Tiger Army. Pang Xiao was so busy that his feet didn't touch the ground. Even the time he had to accompany Qin Yining to eat a meal was squeezed out. However, it was also because of his busyness that the city quickly became orderly. The Tiger Army was ordered to be stationed outside the city. Pang Xiao only brought a portion of his men into the city during the day to do official business. After discussing with the Yuqi Yan appointed Dian officials to manage the affairs in the capital according to Pang Xiao's orders. Pang Xiao would still bring his personal guards back to the barracks before Su Shi. Pang Xiao was swift and decisive in his work. He was also famous for his fighting prowess. Soon, some Dian officials who didn't want to listen to Pang Xiao had to admit that Pang Xiao was capable. For the sake of the people's lives, they had no choice but to listen to Pang Xiao. Of course, some of these officials were relieved because the emperor agreed to surrender, and some were willing to die to show their loyalty. Almost every day, the corpses of officials who had died for their country were carried out from various houses. Some had hanged themselves, some had taken medicine, and some had slit their throats. However, these people's actions still couldn't stop the Yuchi Yan's determination to submit to the Zhou dynasty. Although the capital was greatly damaged by this disaster, the reconstruction work was solid. After a month, there were no more refugees in the city. Some shops were reopened, and the people had the strength to live a normal life. At this time, the city was orderly. It was even more refreshed than before the Zhou attacked. At this time, it was already Lidong. Sister Yi, from today onwards, I'll bring you to live in the city. Your body is weak, and you'll be cold if you stay in the tent all the time. Pang Xiao draped a cotton cloak with a mink fur collar over Qin Yining's shoulders. Qin Yining had not been feeling well recently. Her body had not recovered, and she had been hungry and tired for nearly 2 months. After she came to Pang Xiao's side, once she completely let go of her tense emotions, her weakness came to her. It rained a few days ago, and the weather was cold. Qin Yining caught a cold after being exposed to the wind. She had a fever for the past few days. Pang Xiao could hear her coughing every day when she came back from work. Pang Xiao knew that he couldn't selfishly keep her in the military camp just to spend more time with her. Qin Yining smiled and said, "It's fine. I don't think I'll be as happy at your place even if I go back." She was staying at Pang Xiao's place now. Although Pang Xiao was very busy during the day, they could still see each other every day. In any case, Pang Xiao had already made it clear that Qin Yining was his woman. There was no way she could avoid him. She might as well put down her reputation and focus on enjoying their rare chance to be together. If she went back to the city, it would not be so easy for them to see each other again. How could Pang Xiao not know what Qin Yining was thinking? He lovingly stroked her head and smiled. "All right, since you want to stay with me, I'll ask them to prepare enough silver frost charcoal for you. Actually, if I let you go back, I won't feel at ease. It's better to keep you under my watch." Qin Yining covered her mouth and coughed twice. Then she slowly leaned on Pang Xiao's shoulder. At this moment, Huzi's anxious voice suddenly came from outside. "Wang Yi. Your Majesty sent someone." When Qin Yining heard this, she looked up at Pang Xiao. At this time, Emperor Zhou sent someone to see Pang Xiao. Could it be that there was a new decree? Pang Xiao narrowed his eyes and gradually guessed a few possibilities. A dark whirlpool seemed to be brewing in his phoenix eyes. However, when facing Qin Yining, he was still as gentle as ever. "It's fine. I'll go take a look. You can rest here. I'll ask Ji Yun and Bing Tang to accompany you." "Okay." Qin Yining nodded obediently. Her long hair slid to her chest as she nodded. Pang Xiao got up and put his arms around her neck. He leaned over and kissed her forehead. Only then did he leave. In the command tent, Pang Xiao strode in and saw a familiar person. This king was wondering who it was. "It's Official Lien. I haven't seen Official Lien for a long time. Your complexion looks much better." Pang Xiao sat down on the main seat with a faint smile. He pointed to the seat next to him. "Official Lien, please sit." Lien Xingjie was already afraid of Pang Xiao. When he saw him raise his arm, he became nervous. He was afraid that he would be beaten again. However, when he thought of the purpose of his visit and the fact that he had the emperor's support, he finally gathered his courage. He clasped his hands behind his back and proudly said, "Prince Zhongshuan is too polite. However, as an imperial envoy, this official came with your Majesty's decree." Prince Zhongshuan, please listen to the decree. When Pang Shao heard this, his expression became serious. He stood up and saluted. Lian Xingjie proudly said, Your Majesty's decree is, this time, Prince Zhongshuan has performed a meritorious service. Zhen is very relieved. Zhen hasn't seen Pang Zhishi for a long time and misses him very much. Daiyan's surrender ceremony in the capital is long and tedious. Chapter 286. Such blatant insults and threats. If someone else had said such words, Lian Xingjie would have already made a scene. However, he did not dare to have such a temper in front of Pang Shao. He could only suppress his dissatisfaction and jealousy as he said with a stiff expression, If Wang Yi has the time to bicker with me, why don't you go back and prepare for your return to the capital? Your Majesty's intention is that the Tiger Army is strong and is afraid that there will be trouble in the capital of the Yan dynasty. Therefore, the Tiger Army will be temporarily stationed there. Wang Yi has always liked to keep things simple and will not disappoint Your Majesty's good intentions. Lian Xingjie was already laughing mockingly when he said this. So what if you, Peng Zhishi, have outstanding military achievements? Isn't it just a single word from the emperor that can decide whether you stay or leave, or even whether you live or die? Leaving the Tiger Army in the capital was equivalent to Pang Shao not bringing his own troops back to the capital. If Emperor Zhou made any moves that were disadvantageous to him, he would not have the ability to defend himself or counterattack. As a result, Lian Xingjie felt that his anger could be vented. Peng Zhishi was only tyrannical outside, but in front of the emperor, wasn't he as obedient as a cat? Although Pang Shao knew that Zhou Di must be afraid of him, he did not expect that after he had just subdued Great Yan, Zhou Di would reveal his intention to kill Great Yan in such a straightforward manner. It seemed that Zhou Di's fear of him had reached the point where he didn't care about his own reputation and only wanted to suppress him. Seeing Lian Xingjie's smug face, Pang Shao felt very sick of it. However, this was human nature. The emperor had expressed his fear of him, so how could he expect his subordinates to not have any thoughts? In the end, it was his good brother who caused this. Pang Shao stood up and dusted his robe. Lian Xingjie was so scared that his heart skipped a beat. He took a few steps back in a panic, and his heart beat like a drum. He was afraid that Pang Shao would kill him directly. Because even if Pang Shao really killed him, Your Majesty probably wouldn't do anything to Pang Shao. Seeing Lian Xingjie's embarrassed and fearful appearance, Pang Shao coldly snorted. If he really killed this coward now, not only would he dirty his hands, he would also cause more trouble in the future. Thinking of this, Pang Shao brushed past him. When Pang Shao's figure disappeared in front of the door, Lian Xingjie finally let out a long sigh of relief and sat down to wipe his sweat. That evil fetus was finally going to leave. If he had stayed, he would have gotten a heart attack sooner or later. Pang Shao returned to the tent. As soon as he lifted the curtain and entered, he heard Qin Yining cough a few times. He couldn't help but frown with worry. He asked Bing Tang in a low voice, Why is your Mrs. Body still not getting better? She has taken a lot of medicine. If this is the case, how can I be at ease? Bing Tang said, If the miss wants her body to fully recover, she will need to rest for at least a year. Pang Shao frowned and sat next to Qin Yining. Qin Yining took the tea that Ji Yun brought over and took a few sips. He smiled and asked, Does Your Majesty have other orders for you? Are you going to leave here? Pang Shao froze when he heard this. How did you know? Qin Yining smiled and said, When you just said, How can I be at ease, I could tell that you wanted to leave. Seeing that the two of them were talking, Ji Yun and Bing Tang left. Pang Shao pulled Qin Yining's hand and kissed his fingertips a few times. He then said in a dejected tone, Your Majesty has urgently summoned me back to the capital. I am not allowed to participate in the surrender ceremony. Qin Yining nodded in understanding. I see. He naturally doesn't want you to be in the limelight. Since there is an imperial edict, you have to leave. Yes. Pang Xiao said gloomily, I really don't have a choice. I can't bear to part with you. Why don't you come with me? Although we haven't been together all the time, we still see each other every day. I can't bear to be separated suddenly. Qin Yining was amused by his rare childish tone. How old are you? You still say such unreliable things. How can I leave with you at this time? Wouldn't that be eloping with you? A eloper is a concubine. Could it be that you, Peng Zhishi, want to use the status of a concubine to send me away? Her tone was light and was completely joking. However, Peng Xiao was very serious. He actually sat up straight and thought carefully for a moment. Then, he said seriously, forget it. You are right. I will send you home later. The rest of the matter can wait until you follow your family to the capital. Qin Yining asked, how can you be sure that my family will definitely go to the capital? Your Majesty means that all the Dayan officials above the 4th rank will be given preferential treatment as long as they are willing to surrender. As for a famous official like Grand Preceptor Qin, he naturally can't be allowed to stay in the old capital of the Yan dynasty. I think that after the surrender ceremony is over, the first batch of people to enter the capital will follow Yuqi Qinyan and depart together. Qin Yining sighed faintly. Even now, she still felt that the Yan dynasty being destroyed like this was truly disappointing. However, she always knew that with such an incapable ruler, destruction was inevitable. Seeing her frown, Zhao hugged her tenderly and patted her back comfortingly. Don't worry and follow Grand Preceptor Qin back to the capital. When the time comes, I will think of a way to marry you. Qin Yining closed her eyes and nodded in his arms. Pang Xiao personally sent Qin Yining back to the Qin residence. When they reached the main street near the family Qin residence, Pang Xiao had already ordered someone to stop the car. He said, Sister Yi, I won't stay any closer. You can go back by yourself. I will stay here and watch over you. Qin Yining asked, why don't you come in with me? Pang Xiao smiled and shook his head. He didn't say anything. Qin Yining had already thought it through. Now that Qin Huayuan had surrendered and Pang Xiao's status was so high, he had to salute when they met. Pang Xiao didn't want to make things difficult for Qin Huayuan. Qin Yining put her arms around Pang Xiao's neck and took the initiative to kiss him on the cheek. I know. Take care of yourself. We will meet again in the capital. I think it won't be long before we meet again. Pang Xiao's head was heated by her initiative. His heart beat faster. He held her in his arms and was reluctant to part with her for a long time before he reluctantly let her down from the carriage. Watching her arrive at the gate of the residence accompanied by Ji Yun and Bing Tang, Pang Xiao lowered the curtain and ordered people to return to the barracks. As soon as Qin Yining got home, someone rushed to the Xixiao garden to report the news. Now, the servants in the residence were still the ones who had been brought to Changchun Mountain. Because Qin Yining and Master Zhong had already made preparations, although the people on the mountain had a hard time, none of them had starved to death. In Xiaishao Garden, when the Sun clan heard that their daughter had returned, they didn't have time to care about the old madam. They immediately brought Mother Jean out to welcome her. The old madam's expression was very awkward, but when she thought about the general trend in the future, she still asked Mammy Qin to help her up. She went out with second madam, Miss Ba, and Qin Huaining to welcome her. When they arrived at the Chuihua Gate, the Sun clan and Qin Yining had already entered the inner residence, laughing and chatting. The old madam smiled and said, "Io, Sister Yi is finally back. The Emperor ordered us to prepare for departure. We were wondering if you would like to come with us or go with Prince Zhongshuan." Chapter 287. The Sun Clan member said with a worried expression, "These days, your father and the Emperor have been discussing these matters. The initial time set is the day after tomorrow. However, we don't know if there will be any changes." Qin Yining asked again, "Is my father not at home?" "Your father was urgently summoned to the palace last night and hasn't returned yet. It said that it involves a series of matters related to the surrender. Many things need to be discussed at length. In the end, your father is wholeheartedly thinking for the Emperor and doesn't want the Emperor to suffer losses." Qin Yining nodded in understanding. With Qin Huayuan's temperament, he would definitely stand on his last post. Seeing that Qin Yining only spoke to the Sun Clan member and didn't even greet her or pay attention to her, the old madam felt somewhat embarrassed. The smile that she had managed to put on gradually faded. "Sister Yi, why didn't you say a word when you saw me? Could it be that you've been living too well in the military camp these days and have forgotten all the rules? Our family Qin doesn't have a daughter who doesn't understand etiquette like you." Qin Yining smiled when he heard this. He looked gently at the old madam, but his words weren't gentle at all. "Our family Qin doesn't have a daughter who doesn't understand etiquette. Then, may I ask the old madam, is there a thief who takes without asking for permission in the family Qin?" The old madam's face darkened, and she said with dissatisfaction, "I only ate one of your rabbits. You don't have to hold a grudge until now, right? Your filial piety has been eaten by a dog. What time is it now? You still kept the rabbit and refused to let me eat it. Could it be that you don't care even if I starve to death?" In terms of twisting words and forcing logic, no one would dare to claim to be first if you were ranked second. Qin Yining smiled mockingly. "Could it be that I took the food for myself and refused to let you eat it? Aren't you afraid that your words will make people bitterly disappointed? Moreover, did the old madam and second young mistress ask for my opinion at that time? Taking without asking for permission is considered stealing. Do you still have reason after being a thief? Your father is such a filial person. How did he raise such an unfilial daughter like you?" Qin Yining's face turned cold. "Whether I'm filial or not isn't decided by the old madam's lips. When the disaster came, everyone clearly saw how I treated you. Not to mention the family Qin, even the disaster victims in Ning Garden saw it with their own eyes. But how did you treat me? The old madam is so aggressive. Could it be that you want someone to be the judge?" At the mention of letting someone be the judge, old madam's face completely stiffened. Qin Yining had been with Prince Zhongshuan day and night these days. If she wanted to judge, she would naturally go to Prince Zhongshuan. Although they still had a plaque that said Marquis Fu, the title of a Marquis of Anping was conferred by the emperor of the previous dynasty. When they went to the Great Zhou dynasty in the future, it was uncertain what their lives would be like. Their future was uncertain. And Qin Yining was definitely going to become Prince Zhongshuan's woman. No matter if she was a concubine or a secondary consort, she wanted a lifetime of glory, splendor, and wealth. Moreover, she could casually blow a pillow to Prince Zhongshuan, and it might be enough to end their lives. Thinking of this, the old madam's arrogance no longer existed. She wanted to say a few nice words, but she couldn't bring herself to do so. For a moment, she stood awkwardly in the same place, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. In the end, it was Mammy Qin who could understand her master's intentions. Seeing that the old madam was in a difficult position, she immediately knelt down in front of Qin Yining. "Fourth miss, please calm down. That day's matter was completely this servant's own initiative. Fourth miss, please forgive this servant." Qin Yining's gaze softened. She respected Mammy Qin very much. Mammy Qin was not only loyal and devoted to the old madam, but she was also very sensible. Moreover, Qin Yining always remembered that Mammy Qin had helped her in the past. Her expression eased, and she supported Mammy Qin with both hands. Mammy Chin, you don't have to be like this. I originally didn't want to pursue this matter. She looked coldly at the old madam. In the future, we won't disturb each other and will each maintain their dignity. The old madam's face was gloomy. Although she was relieved that Qin Yining didn't pursue this matter, she still felt that she had lost face. Qin Yining ignored the old madam and also ignored Qin Huining. She only nodded her head in greeting to 8th Mississippi. Then, she took the Sun Clan's hand and returned to her boudoir in the master's study. She carefully inquired about the situation in the residence these days. The Sun Clan only knew that everything was the same as before. She pulled Qin Yining's hand and asked in a low voice, "Sister Yi, you and Prince Zhongshuan. Have you made up your mind to follow Prince Zhongshuan in the future?" Qin Yining's face instantly turned red. She naturally knew what her mother meant by asking this question. She coughed a few times to feel less embarrassed. "Mother, don't think too much. There's nothing between him and me. However, the people outside have long seen us as a couple. If I don't stay with him, public opinion won't allow it." Upon hearing this, the Sun Clan understood. She said, "Mother doesn't have any other meaning. I'm just afraid that you won't have a good life. Our family status is not what it used to be. In the past, the two of you could be considered a match. But now that the Dian dynasty has fallen, your father is going to Dezhou. I don't even know if he will become a prisoner. I'm just afraid that you will suffer." Qin Yining obediently leaned on the Sun Clan's shoulder. She smiled and said, "I know that mother is worried about me. However, you can rest assured. Dezhou's emperor is a very shrewd person. The current situation in the Zhou dynasty doesn't allow him to mistreat the surrendered subjects. Therefore, if our family goes to Dezhou, not only will we not lose our lives, perhaps father will have more room for development." "Really?" The Sun Clan looked hopefully at Qin Yining. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Of course, it's true. After all, Dezhou was established not long ago. At that time, the successive years of war had already emptied Beiji's treasury. The Zhou dynasty took over a mess. In addition, in the past 2 years, the north of Dezhou was harassed by the Taitan. In the south, there was also a war with us. The losses from the war were huge. If the Zhou dynasty wants to stabilize the country, it will need at least 20 years of peace and prosperity to develop the economy and recuperate. In order to develop this, it needs capable subjects and talents. The Zhou dynasty's emperor is not an incapable ruler like our retired emperor. He won't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Naturally, he will use capable subjects like my father. Moreover, he still needs the surrendered subjects of Dian to balance the power in the imperial court." The Sun Clan was not stupid. If she had to think about these things on her own, she might not be able to understand. However, she could understand when Qin Yining explained it to her. "What do you mean by balance?" "The art of an emperor is to balance the power. The current situation in the imperial court of Dezhou consists of the trusted subordinates who followed the Zhou dynasty's emperor to conquer the world and the surrendered subjects of Beiji who surrendered to the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou emperor is in urgent need of a third team to join. Only when the three of them keep each other in check can the most stable situation be formed. My father happens to be the representative of the surrendered subjects of the Yan dynasty. Therefore, mother, you can rest assured that not only will the Zhou dynasty's emperor not mistreat our family, but he will also use my father in the short term." Hearing Qin Yining's thorough analysis of the situation, the Sun Clan's heart finally calmed down. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Qin Huayuan outside the door laugh and say, "It seems that Sister Yi has improved again." "Father." Qin Yining stood up happily. The door was opened, and Qin Huayuan walked in with a smile. "I didn't expect to hear you whispering to your mother when I rarely come to see you. Father, please excuse me. Qin Yining bowed to Qin Huaiyuan and then asked, Father, have you seen the Lianqingjie? Did he make any other unreasonable demands? Chapter 288. Qin Huaiyuan thought for a moment and realized that Qin Yining must have seen Lianqingjie in the barracks. He smiled and said, he didn't do anything excessive this time. However, since the emperor surrendered, his position is naturally lower than Dezhou's. If he doesn't allow them to make any demands, there's no other way. However, with father's wisdom, you won't let the emperor suffer too much, Qin Yining said with a smile. That's right. Qin Huaiyuan also smiled, I heard your analysis just now. Perhaps when I go to the great Zhou dynasty, I will have more space to fulfill my ambitions. With father's talent and wit, these aren't difficult matters. You have a lot of confidence in father. That's natural, Qin Yining said with certainty, father will definitely accomplish great things in Dezhou. The Sun clan watched as father and daughter chatted. Although she couldn't get a word in edgewise, the satisfaction in her heart was unprecedented. At this moment, she suddenly felt that she could already be content with her life. There was no need to hate or be jealous of Chao Yuqing. Chao Yuqing was indeed young and beautiful, but so what? No matter what, she was the one who had a daughter with Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huaiyuan acknowledged her as his first wife. No matter how beautiful Chao Yuqing was, she was still only a concubine. During this period of time, whenever the Sun clan thought of Chao Yuqing's personal bodyguard when Qin Huaiyuan defended the city, she felt as if a 1,000-pound stone had been placed on her heart, making it hard for her to breathe. However, now that the family of three was reunited, the knots in her heart that couldn't be untied were suddenly untied. Percent over the next 2 days, many of the wealthy families in the capital were intensely preparing for the trip. The family Qin was naturally taken care of by second master and third master with Qin Yu and Qin Han. Qin Yining, on the other hand, met manager Zhong in private. Don't worry, boss. I've already dealt with the matters you've assigned me. Previously, when we purchased those lands in secret, I've done a careful calculation. The total amount of fertile farmlands and paddy fields in the capital city and the surrounding areas accounted for more than 60% of the total farmlands in the surrounding areas. Together with those paddy fields and terraced farmlands we purchased outside, you are now considered as one of the top landlords in Great Yan Dynasty. Qin Yining nodded and said, these lands are not under my name, right? Don't worry, the people I've arranged are all proper people. No matter how they investigate, they won't be able to trace it back to you. That's good. Before we set off, let's arrange for the disaster victims in Ning Garden to be relocated to various residences. Now that there's no more fighting, this place is part of Dezhou's territory. They can earn their own living and rebuild their homes. Yes. Master Zhong was full of admiration. They owe you a debt of gratitude for saving their lives. Now that you've arranged work for them, they'll be even more grateful to you. Qin Yining smiled and shook his head. My original intention in doing this wasn't to make people feel grateful. Consider this an additional reward. But have you really decided to go to Dezhou? Of course, Master Zhong said. The Dayan dynasty has been destroyed, and the existence of the Zhao Yun agency is history. In the future, we won't need to hire prisoners to work. Those prisoners will probably be pardoned soon. Our inns and restaurants will just be ordinary inns and restaurants in the future. I'm thinking that when doing business, the bigger business opportunities will naturally be in the more prosperous cities. When Qin Yining saw Master Zhong's high-spirited appearance, he couldn't help but laugh. Actually, with you coming along, I'll feel more at ease. How about this, you don't have to rush to set off with me. I think that the people going to Dezhou's capital from here will have to be divided into several groups. Head shopkeeper, you can stay here and make some arrangements. It won't be too late to go to the capital after you've made your arrangements. When that time comes, I'll have a firm foothold in the capital, and we'll be able to do things as we did before. Master Zhong nodded repeatedly. I'll listen to boss. Qin Yining and Master Zhong discussed the details in detail. When they had come up with a solution for all the problems and unexpected situations that they could consider, they went their separate ways. At this time, Pang Xiao had already left with a few bodyguards. The official from Dezhou who accepted the Yu Qiyan's letter of surrender was the newly appointed Minister of Rights, Lian Xingjie. After a simple ceremony, the Yu Qiyan presented the letter of surrender. Lian Xingjie received the letter of surrender in high spirits, then immediately announced the decree of the Emperor of Dezhou. The former Emperor of Yan, Yu Qiyan, is conferred the title of Prince of Yan. His first wife, Lady Li, is conferred the title of Prince of Yan. He is bestowed a residence in the capital. After that, there was a series of rewards, but they were all just words. Lian Xingjie claimed that he had come in a hurry, and it wasn't convenient for him to travel all the way from Dezhou to Daian with valuables. Naturally, those rewards would have to wait for the Prince of Yan to arrive in the capital. Yu Qiyan's heart was filled with humiliation as he accepted the decree. He had gone from being the ruler of a country to a mere prince. His rank was even lower than Pang Xiao's. However, such was fate. With things as they were, Yu Qiyan had no other choice. He could only listen to whatever the people of Dezhou wanted. After the ceremony ended, Lian Xingjie gave another verbal decree. In 10 days, the families heading to the capital would depart. Everyone was ordered to be prepared. Pang Xiao, who only brought Huzi and a few dozen Jinghu Wei, had already galloped through most of Dezhou and quickly arrived at the southern gate of the capital. Huzi led Pang Xiao's horse and said with a smile, "We're finally back. We've been traveling day and night for the past few days. The bumpy ride has made my bones feel like they're going to fall apart." Jinghu Wei beside him laughed, "Or did you not train enough? Why didn't I see Wang Yi complain about being tired? I heard you complaining the whole way. I don't believe that all of you are made of iron." Huzi laughed as he scolded. Suddenly, he stretched his neck to look in front of the southern gate. "Wang Yi, I think I see Marquis Ding Bei." Pang Xiao looked in the direction of Huzi's finger, and saw a tall young man. He was clad in a snow-white fox fur coat. He was sitting upright on a fiery red horse. His face was expressionless as he looked in Pang Xiao's direction. The young man was even more beautiful than a woman. He had slender, sword-like eyebrows, sparkling peach blossom eyes, a high nose bridge, and thin lips. He looked like someone who had walked out of a painting. If one were to compare his facial features, Pang Xiao would be slightly inferior. Even if one were to compare Qin Yining with him, it could only be considered a draw. However, even though he was a handsome man whose every frown and smile was enough to move one's soul, his personality was as cold as ice and he was not amenable to human emotions. His extraordinarily handsome face rarely had a smile. His personality was cold and he was a man of few words. He was even more ruthless when it came to killing. He did not have much contact with Pang Xiao. However, he was the person that Pang Xiao was willing to become sworn brothers with. Pang Xiao stood in place and raised his eyebrows slightly with a smile. "Why have you also returned to the capital?" You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.